Okay, Chair, let's go.
Thank you, Clerk, and good morning, members to Fáilte Rómha Lig. We do have a quorum, and I now call the meeting to order and welcome all of you to the 53rd meeting of the Committee for Communities. Can I remind anyone in the public gallery there that mobile phones must be turned off. Mobile tablet devices can, however, be used through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available in the gallery for anyone wanting to connect to Assembly's Wi-Fi network, and no recordings or photographs may be taken. Can I remind members about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices? Switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and please activate Wi-Fi connection. Please also use tablet devices discreetly and in a way which does not interfere with proceedings, and be aware of the sensitivity of microphones and your tablet devices throughout the meeting. And just to reference that Hansard is here today as well, given that the Minister is appearing. So thank you, members. Agenda item 1 then is declaration of interests, and I would remind members of your responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. So in terms of my own interest, I'll just mention that I'm a member of the Public Accounts Committee. I own a residential property in County Tyrone from which rental income is received. I am a director of a number of charities and also a member of Brantry Cultus and Ahalou GAA. Any interest, members? Andy?
Yeah, Chair, private sector landlord, charity trustee, member of a trade union, and participate in sport, Paralympic pathway sport.
Thanks, Andy. Brian?
Just to declare, I'm a member of the Committee for the Executive Offices, correspondence from them, and I'm a director in some charities.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Daniel?
Chair of the Public Accounts Committee, member of Ernie GAA.
Thank you.
Member of the GAA, Castledare, Cleve Owen, Conor na Gaeilge, and Kilturry
Margaret? Kelly?
Oh no, I don't have any declarations this time.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay.
In addition, I should have mentioned to Cahirlock, a chairperson of Nice Gun the Jerica.
Yep. Okay.
Sorry, Chair, just as there's been specific, Secretary of Paisley Park Sportsplex, which is a sports complex.
Okay, thank you, Brian. And I'll just pause a second, Maurice. Just we are joined by Maurice Bradley, and Maurice, we're just taking members' interest, so I just want to check with you before we move off that. If you have anything you wish to declare for today's meeting. No,
we're doing some sport ones. I don't know if you.
Oh, you're doing sport? I'm a member of the IFA Council, Harry Gregg Foundation, Korean District League, Northwest League. Well, that's what I can think of at the moment.
If you need something done, ask a busy man, Maurice. Okay, thank you.
I'll just go back in the deck.
Okay, thanks, Maurice. We're delighted you were able to join us today with all those commitments. Okay, members, so moving on then to agenda item 3, Chair's business. So before we start, the Minister is due in at 10:15. Our members agreed that we pause wherever we are at the business at that point for both the Minister's briefing and then the departmental briefing on the June monitoring round, and then pick up wherever we have left off at that point. Members are agreed. Thank you. Members, before I outline a few essential housekeeping issues, you will have noticed a lot of table correspondence from the Department. The Committee has raised the issue of the Monday deadline for meeting papers before. We received table papers on Tuesday, giving us little time to consider some significant issues. Ahead of the Minister Attending Committee, I must put it on record again that the Department must provide information to the Committee in a timely fashion if we are to carry out our scrutiny and support function effectively. So, in terms of housekeeping then, for the period of recess, in terms of freedom of information requests, it is standard practice to delegate authority to the chairperson and deputy chairperson during recess to submit views on the releasing or withholding of information in any non-routine or contentious freedom of issue requests received by the committee, and that any such views expressed will be brought to the attention of the committee at the first meeting after summer recess. Are members content with this approach for summer recess? Thank you, members.
Just on that, just if it's okay, just about the winter fuel payment, to see that legislation's going to go through over the summer.
We will be discussing that at a later SR point. Right. The winter fuel payment will come up, and we can take your Thoughts then at that point, Brian?
Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Okay, thank you. In terms of correspondence then, members, the committee team will continue obviously to receive correspondence over the summer. It is standard practice that the team includes these items for consideration at the committee's first meeting in September 2025. However, it is up to each committee whether they wish to agree any urgent matters via correspondence. If this is the case, it will be included in the minutes of the next formal meeting of the committee once the Assembly resumes in the autumn. Are members content that any urgent matters are dealt with via correspondence?
Yeah.
Thank you. For standard correspondence then, members, I propose that the committee receives 2 correspondence packs during recess, one at the end of July and another at the end of August. So that's to ensure the first meeting back is not taken up by consideration of an overly significant amount of correspondence. The pack will ask members to indicate if they are content to note or if they wish certain items to be brought again for further consideration at the first meeting in September. So those can be picked up and brought forward. Again, those decisions will be minuted. Are members content with that approach?
Yes, please.
Thank you, members. And members, the forward work programme then will be revisited after the summer recess, and the clerk will provide an outlined strategic plan and draft priorities for review and agreement based on the exercise which the committee undertook during our last planning session. If members are content with that. End of session reports, members then. Historically, at the end of each session, committees produce end of session reports. This is to be published on the committee pages of the Assembly website and provides a single source of information on the activities and achievements of each committee. Our next report, therefore, is due in September 2025. And moving on to the second stage vote on the Universal Credit and Personal Independent Payment Bill, which took place on Tuesday. The committee, of course, has been very engaged on this issue and have wrote a joint letter regarding benefit reform, to which there has been a reply that we will be considering later in the meeting. I just wish to draw attention to the key concession, as it's been termed, offered by the British Government to lessen the risk of a second stage rejection of the bill. This involved potential changes to the implementation of the PIP eligibility criteria pending the findings of the ongoing review. And the result of that was the government's working majority was cut from 165 to 75. I just want to put on the record, I think there remains massive concerns within out there in society with people who depend so much on these supports. I think it's very unclear now what the ramifications of all those late minute changes are. However, what remains the case is that people remain worried and alarmed. And I think that's something that we as a committee will have to obviously keep an eye on as time goes forward. And obviously the Minister and his department will as well. Okay, thanks members for that. Moving on to agenda item 4 then, which is the draft minutes, and those are the minutes from the meeting of 26th of June, and they're page 7. Are members content to agree the minutes of 26th of June as drafted?
Agreed.
Right.
Thank you, and those minutes will be signed off as usual at the next formal meeting of the committee. In
This meeting's minutes.
the meetings of this minute, the minute of this meeting will be signed off in September, and members have agreed the 26th of June as drafted. Yeah, thank you. Okay, members, matters arising then, agenda item 5, and there's a summary table as usual of matters arising at page 18. Just before I go to the first block, which includes 5.2, I think the committee should welcome the fact the Department is now developing proposals to provide for an indefinite disregard in respect of payments received from the schemes by individuals resident here for the purpose of calculating eligibility for income-based social security benefits. And we await the SL1 on that, but that is an issue that we have. In fact, we've asked for a dedicated piece of work around these types of issues to be drawn into a more coherent kind of strategy, so it's good to see that that's taking place in that case. So can I ask then if members have any comments or issues you wish to draw out, highlight or seek briefings on in relation to the matters arising between 5.2 and 5.4? Kelly?
Just on 5.4, the correspondence from the Housing Executive, it would be useful to find out what are the penalties that can be taken. I know that that would be decided by the courts, but if the Housing Executive could outline if tenancy fraud is identified, what is the potential penalties that could be provided by the courts, if they could update us on that, because I'm sure that they would be highlighting, the severity of tenancy fraud.
Yeah, would members be content with that? Yeah, thank you. Any other queries in relation to 5.2 to 5.4, members? No, thank you. Then moving on to table papers, which you will see there at 5.6 in table papers. There's a revised version of the arts report that the committee agreed last week and which was forwarded directly to the Minister. Text has been revised in paragraphs 20 and 26 as detailed in the memo. Are members content with that revised wording? Yep. Thank you, members. For 5.8 and the request for a joint Department and Department of Finance briefing, are members content to be right to the Department of Finance seeking their attendance at the proposed joint meeting? Yep. Thank you. And for 5.9, are members content that the committee confirms a date for a further briefing on the anti-poverty strategy, which we had requested? Yep. Thank you. So, any other items in terms of table papers in terms of the matters arising, members?
No.
Okay. I wonder, do we have? Okay, so we'll move on then to correspondence, members, then at agenda item 6. The memo for which is contained at page 35. So for both items 6.4 and 6.5, I have asked officials to schedule consideration time and support for September.
Okay.
This will give sufficient time for the committee to provide any input to the Committee for Finance in good time for the deadlines. So if members are agreed with that.
Yep.
Can I ask then if members have any comments on items 6.2 to 6.6? Kelly?
6.2, I know that it's it's down for us to note, but the individual has included some questions. I'm just wondering if we should write to the department to fulfil that scrutiny role with those questions that are posed on page 39.
Which item is that, Kelly? Sorry.
6.2, sorry.
Yeah. What's the question again? Sorry.
It's just that the individual has raised some matters at the end of their comment, so it's committee action requested and highlight of these concerns that scrutinise the actions of the Department of Communities and other bodies in relation to the closure. Is just to write to the department to get clarification on those. I'm not sure all of them are relevant to the department, but it would be useful just to get a response.
Okay, thank you. And then can I ask, I'm moving to 6.7 to 6.11. Are there any items within that block, 6.7 to 6.11? No, thank you.
Ellen, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Maurice.
The request there for a meeting from Turley. Do you think they should?
From who, sorry?
From Turley. 6.7. Should we meet them just to see what the industry thinks?
Chair, just on
Page
that.
140.
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. So it's one of those ones, Morris. I do understand the crossover, but with so many other things, I'm just wondering: is it more an infrastructure? But I'm open to member suggestion. But I know we have a very packed schedule. I'm just
Not particular. I'm just thinking that it's relevant to house building, and if the chair thinks that it's worth it, I'd be happy enough. If the chair thinks it's not worth it, I'll also be happy enough.
well, I don't it's not that it's not worth it. It's absolutely worth it. I think it's just whether time. But I'm like it's members. It's for members to decide. So go ahead, Kelly.
Could I maybe suggest then we write sending that paper to the Committee for Infrastructure to ask them for their comment?
Yeah, I think that'll be a useful. Yeah.
At the
useful
all-party
suggestion.
group on the built environment, which used to be construction, it was brought up and discussed, and to be honest, the paper reflects quite a bit of the Fiscal Council and other, so it would be worthwhile just hearing from the Infrastructure Committee. I'm sure they're looking at it as well.
Okay, so members are content we forward that for comment? Yep. Thank you. Anything else in 6.7 to 6.11, Sharon?
Yeah, just on 6.9, the child maintenance, obviously with the consultation having ended, it would just be really useful to get, I suppose, an update of where the department kind of, I suppose, is falling into this and not falling in behind the UK government. I mean, I think there have been issues brought up to me in terms of this system not being fit for purpose, particularly if you're a complying parent. It is a system that is designed for non-compliance, and those who are actively paying are still being subjected to the same tone of letters, the same level of communication as someone who is not compliant. So it would just be, I suppose, it would be useful to understand when these changes will come into effect in terms of the reform to the service type and I suppose where we're sitting with the consultation is just a bit of an update on the child maintenance service, if possible.
Okay, members content with that suggestion? Yeah. Thank you. Clerk content, yeah? Okay, members,
Sorry, Chair.
yeah, go ahead,
Can I
Karen.
come in on 6.8, page 181? I just want to know if there's going to be a standardised approach for how this is going to work, given the fact that the housing associations will be doing their own investigation and the housing executive can then come in and look at that. So it would be useful to find out from the housing executive if there will be a standardised approach to this, of how each of the grants will be issued and worked on, just given the fact that so many bodies are involved.
Members content, we seek that information.
It's just when we've got Radius and Shelter who have two quite different approaches to how they do the disabled facilities grant support, it would nearly be good, in the old days of ISO standards, that there was a level of ticking off, have they done this with the client and this with the client. It'd be good to see that.
Okay, thank you. And members content, yeah. So members, I suggest now the officials from the department are here and the minister here. I suggest now we break there and return to correspondence at items 6.7 to 6.11 and moving on to 6.12 to 6.19 following the briefings, if members are content.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. So that means then we're moving on to agenda item 7, ministerial briefing session. I now like to welcome Minister Lyons to the meeting, along with the following officials who join the Minister. So we have Mr Colin Boyle, Permanent Secretary, Emer Morelli, Deputy Secretary, Engaged Communities Group. Emer, very welcome. Mark O'Donnell, Housing Sustainability Group, and John Greer, who's Deputy Secretary in Corporate Services Group. So, Minister, you're very welcome to committee, and I invite you to make a brief opening statement before we move to questions from members. Members have indicated that we wish to ask questions on the theme of strategies, housing, sport and culture and heritage, and a wee bit on the legislative programme as well, if we can get an update on that towards the end. So I'd remind members at this point that the committee is receiving a briefing immediately following the Minister on the June monitoring round, and that's very welcome as well. So Minister, over to you, go ahead please.
Mr Chairman, I know we're limited in time today, and I'm guessing that members would like to get straight to questions, so I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Minister, much appreciated. So I suppose the first question from me is in relation to, and the first theme we've agreed is around the anti-poverty strategy. We have in recent days seen a number of groups come out to express their concern around the strategy as drafted and as out to consultation at the present time. They're very significant groups, I think you'll agree, Minister, very credible groups with huge amounts of expertise. I also note that there's a very positive framing around their letter, their open letter, in the sense that they're saying they are very keen to work with you and to work with others to ensure that this strategy is effective, and I think that's what we all want. So can I ask what your plans are to engage with that sector on their concerns and to ensure that that positive attitude they have, I think, brought for a long period of time, and the expertise they bring is leveraged into the strategy going forward?
Okay, well, thank you. And look, I want to say this first of all about those that have signed the letter. I believe that they are sincere and genuine in their attempts to tackle poverty right across Northern Ireland. I believe that they have an important contribution to make. I believe they already have made an important contribution already through some of the work that they have been involved in. So I welcome this intervention because this is a consultation process. I don't know how other ministers handle this, but I'm very genuine and sincere in wanting this process to be open. I want it to be transparent. I want people to have the opportunity to give their view. So I very much will take on board what has been said so far, but also the other concrete proposals or suggestions that they will bring forward. Look, I disagree with some of the things that have been said. For example, I believe that we will have targets that are going to come forward as part of the action plan. We will be able to benchmark those, we'll be able to measure those, we'll be able to hold ourselves to account through those as well. I don't agree when they say that there's nothing new in the strategy. I think there's a number of things that are new within it, and I also believe that it is right that we attach funding to some of the measures that are in place, and that is what we're going to have. So I note the fact that they've said this consultation should be removed altogether. I disagree with that. I disagree with when they said that this is a document that would be harmful overall. But I do want to listen. I believe that many of the concerns that have been raised can be addressed. And let's hear what people have to say during the consultation. Let's see what else that they want to put in. And I will certainly share that with other members of the executive, because having reviewed again some of the suggestions that they had highlighted in their work that wasn't part of the process, I'm happy to raise that with other colleagues in the executive, because you'll be aware that there was considerable work that went on through the cross-departmental working group, and it was up to individual departments to come back with the areas for inclusion. And there's certainly some that I would have no issue putting in. It just those ministers hadn't brought those forward at that time. So I have a particular interest in community wealth building. We see that in the Northwest and in Larne. Certainly in terms of issues around broadband, something I've been working on considerably, especially during my time in the Department for the Economy, and access to affordable transport services. So there are things that we can add in. Some of those may be for the strategy itself. Some of those are ideas that can be put into the action plan. But considerable work has been done, and I don't believe that it's right for us to scrap the consultation, because other people will want to have their say as well. But I want to make it very clear, I will listen to all views that are that will be presented during the consultation. But just to finish, I will say this: there's lots that I could have put in here. There's lots of additional measures that I could have said, let's make sure we include those. But I need to make sure that we have something that's credible. I'm not prepared to be a minister that puts everything that we might like to do into a strategy if I am in the full knowledge that I'm not able to deliver those, or if the executive does not have the funding for those. I want it to be something that we can say, we can get on with this, we can do this, and we can actually deliver it. I have no intention of producing a strategy for the executive to agree to if we don't have the necessary resource or ability to deliver it.
Would you agree it also needs to be ambitious?
Absolutely, and I think that we do have ambition in here when you look at what it is that we're actually trying to achieve. And I hope that you'll be able to see that whenever it comes to the action plans in particular as well. But I would encourage people to read the document as a whole. The important thing for me here is that we're trying to tackle the root causes of poverty. We don't need a sticking plaster approach. We don't need to be tackling the problem. At the end, we need to be preventing the problems in the first place. And in terms of what we have in front of us, I think this is where we need to be. That doesn't mean that I'll not listen to what can make it better.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. Sian?
Yep, thanks very much, Minister. It's good to see you at committee. The British government has already announced that they will be rolling out things like the school breakfast scheme, the free school meals to all families that are recipients of universal credit. Now, they say at 100k children out of poverty in England. Have you considered any way that we could contribute, I suppose, or replicate some of that, and the Barnett consequentials that will come, hopefully, from those child poverty measures? Is there any indication that could be put towards something along the lines of this type of programme in Northern Ireland?
I think the first thing to say is I want the strategy to be agile and flexible, because this will be a 10-year strategy, so I'm not putting something in place and this is it, what we have right now will be it forever. I think what we need to realise is that whenever we are in a constrained budgetary environment, we should look at those measures that are most effective. So for example, if some of the things you've just mentioned there in terms of free school meals and other issues, if we see them having an impact and if they are effective, then absolutely that's something that we can consider and bring in, and it's something that I will be speaking to the Education Minister about, as I intend to speak to all ministers after the consultation process is over. We will look at the suggestions that have been raised, and I will ask them what their view is on whether they find that is affordable, whether it's something that we need the executive to allocate additional funding specifically for. And I think that's the other value in having the strategy, is that we are working in a joined up way. Then we can say, right, well, we've agreed to do this. How do we find the resource that's available? But again, we need to make sure that every pound that we spend is spent wisely, and that every pound that we spend has most effect. There are lots of good things that we can do, but in the limited budgetary situation that we find ourselves in, we need to make sure we're doing the very best, that we're investing in those areas that will have the maximum impact. The approach that we took in terms of the anti-poverty strategy was to bring together this cross-departmental working group, and then ministers brought their own individual actions. If additional ones are being suggested, that's absolutely something we can look at.
Great. And then in terms of the action plan, do we have a timeline of when that will come before us, and what will that look like? What will the action plan that you envision look like, and will it have, as you've just said, it will have targets as part of it, that will be measurable? So I suppose it's really just an understanding of what you envision that will actually look like.
Yeah. I suppose it's what we find in most of the strategies that are produced by the executive. Action plans will follow. I want this to be done as quickly as possible. I want to make sure that we have them in place and for the set period of time that we can measure progress against. In terms of the targets, I want to make sure we put targets in place that can properly measure what it is that we are actually trying to achieve. So if we set a goal for something to come into place, that will need to be time bound. We'll need to have a time to do that. We'll need to have a level at which we want to achieve as well. We need to make sure that that's credible and deliverable. Emer, I don't know if you have any specific view on...
So work is continuing on the action plan to give the committee that assurance. We're not waiting until the final consultation closes or the final strategy is available. It's working in tandem, and obviously will be informed by the consultation responses. The action plan itself, and we're very, very mindful of the recommendations of PAC and the Northern Ireland Audit Committee in respect of targets, measures and indicators, and they will all be brought into play, of course, across the action plan. The action plan, as Minister said, is part of the agility of the strategy, and if an action is deemed not to be working or determined through the monitoring process, it will be stopped or a new action brought in that way to help us turn the curve. So the indicators are very, very important in that framework of monitoring in that space. But work is ongoing on this. We are not, as I say, at a standstill now, and all departments are engaged.
Because that is definitely the biggest worry that has been brought up to me, is just that lack of real tangible, measurable outcomes. And the other thing just is, in terms of specific actions or things that are brought up there, you said there are a number of things that are new. Again, that is really difficult to look at. When I look at that, I don't see that there are very many new initiatives or innovative approaches. It is, and I understand that a lot of that was coming from different departments, but a lot of that, when you look at it, are things that are already ongoing, and that is a genuine worry that we are just putting together a strategy that doesn't have a budget attached to it, and that is just telling us what's already going on.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the criticisms that was in the letter from the group, but there are going to be new measures that are put in place, and there will be budgets allocated towards those. And for example, and what I want to do in terms of employability programmes, I hope to be able to announce that soon. That's going to be a considerable sum of money that I'm setting aside for that, because I've seen the difference that makes. I think I've said to the committee before, one of the standout memories that I have from my time in office so far was meeting with a young man who had autism and had struggled to get employment. His parents thought he would never get a job, but through the help in our employability programmes, we've got him a job that he's excelling at and has been promoted at, actually, within the civil service. So that's going to be new programmes that we're putting in place for that, and some of the other things as well that I've mentioned previously. But I think that it was one of the criticisms that I've received, but I think it is important that we do put in place into the strategy the things that we're currently doing, because it is important to keep them going as well.
Okay. Okay, so we now have, I'm going to our Deputy Chair, Nicola Brogan, then I have Brian and Kelly. So, and if I could ask everyone just to keep it as succinct and tight as possible, please. Nicola, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, and to your officials for attending here this morning, and apologies I couldn't be there in person. Minister, you mentioned there about how you want to bring a draft strategy that was credible, and with all due respect, I think from the letter and the tone of the letter that was received this week, that certainly some people don't deem this strategy credible. And to be honest, one commentator actually said we'd be better off with no strategy at all, that this here draft one was actually going to set us back and deepen the crisis with poverty. So the consultation is open until September. So I just wonder, will you commit to listening to the views of those within the anti-poverty sector and do what you can to strengthen what the strategy can actually deliver?
Yes, of course I will. I've committed to that already, that I will listen to those, not just to those that I suppose we would say are specifically in the anti-poverty sector, but widely, right across society. We listen to everything that comes through that consultation process. I am sincere and genuine in wanting to make this the best strategy that can be. We will listen to all of the recommendations and find a way forward.
Thank you.
Chair.
Right. Go ahead, Nicola. Are you looking back in?
Well, I was going to come back in on another strategy, or should we?
I will come
Right.
back. We'll come back. There's a number of questions on anti-poverty, so we'll come around to that. Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Minister. We've limited time, but I wondered if you have any comment on the welfare reform changes at Westminster this week. Clearly, there's been progress made in protecting existing claimants with the changes made. I do wonder, has any assessment been made? Will there be overall savings to the public purse or not? Some are saying there won't. And two other things I'd like to ask about. The commitment to £1 billion for employability support. Will Northern Ireland get a share of that? And is there any update on the element of tackling fraud and error within the system?
Okay. Look, thanks for those questions. I think it is important to raise it because we can't tackle poverty alone. It is going to require help and assistance from others. And I think that's why it's so important that this strategy is agile as well, because we've seen over the last week the changes that can take place and the impacts that will have. So just take a few of your questions. In terms of employability support, we will get Barnett consequences for that. And I'll be doing my best working with the Finance Minister to ensure that those are at ring fence and that we can use those, because we have a number of programmes that we can step up. We have seen already how important they are and the real change and difference that they can make. In terms of dealing with poverty, welfare system plays a really, really important role in that. And so I think it is important that I place on record just how appalled I am by this Labour government and how they have conducted themselves over the last number of months. I believe their approach has been shameful. I believe that it has caused significant stress for many in our society, even those who I believe would never have been affected by the changes that had been proposed and those that perhaps would have been. It has caused a huge amount of stress. My initial estimates were that this would be costing Northern Ireland about £150 million. After we did a full impact assessment, that was £250 million. After the first set of changes that were proposed by the government, which I think only lasted for a matter of hours, the savings were just £83 million. And after the changes that took place the other night, we're at very early stages of assessment, but we believe ultimately that it will end up costing. It will not create any saving at all in Northern Ireland. So I think that has been an incredible mess. They've made a real hames of it, if I'm being honest. And I have a team of probably around 40 people that have been working on this over the last number of months, and all of that work that they've been doing, whether that's in policy work, analytical work, finance work, the operational teams, that's all for nothing now. So I think that's being handled absolutely appallingly, and I want to reassure you I've made that clear on behalf of myself, the executive, and I hope the wider assembly on many, many occasions that I've met the UK government, and I've met frequently with Stephen Timms, and I told him and other ministers why it was wrong to go down this route. And unfortunately, we have been proven right, and that comes at expense to people here in Northern Ireland. Just while we're on the subject, I also just want to provide some information to the committee in relation to winter fuel payment. I know there's some concerns about how quickly we're going to have to rush this through the Assembly, but we've now finished our analysis. There are 336,000 pensioners in Northern Ireland, and HMRC are now estimating that 86% or 288,000 will receive the winter fuel payment in 25-26 because they have an income of less than £35,000. 20% will not receive it in the UK as a whole. That is only 14% in Northern Ireland. Again, another mess by this government. It was inevitable that they would have to have changed course. I'm pleased that we were able to provide that £17 million of support to help some of those that would otherwise have missed out. But certainly it's a very, very poor record.
I wonder, could you send us through a written summary of that as well, please?
More than happy to.
And there may be some of the items under question where it may be more useful time-wise if you provide us with something following the committee in rates.
Absolutely, the information.
But that's useful to know.
Send that through. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, and just one other thing in this, I think this is useful. You'd raised in relation to welfare fraud. I'm happy to announce to the committee that just this morning we have received from the Chief Secretary to the Treasury confirmation that the Executive can submit a business case ahead of the autumn budget. And if there are savings through us tackling welfare fraud and error that are certified by the Office for Budget Responsibility, the Treasury will consider providing for us a share of those savings. And those savings are massive. A very, very small amount of money that we put in, and you can get incredible savings from those. So that could be a net benefit to Northern Ireland. So we will be progressing that business case. I have a paper with the Executive. I hope it will get on the agenda because I think that could be very, very important. So those are some items of good news, and appreciate your latitude, Mr.
Thank you. And we may indeed pick that up in terms of the officials that are coming in next. So that's something we can follow up as well. But I'm conscious now we do have a number of other members on the anti-poverty stuff. So Kelly, Daniel and Melissa, please.
I promise, Chair, I'll be quick, and thank you, Minister, for coming along today, and to all of your officers. Minister, you've mentioned there that your ears are open and you want to listen to the solutions that are coming forward to the anti-poverty strategy through the consultation. During that period of time, will the department be reviewing the work behind the anti-poverty strategy and updating some of the evidence?
Well, we have an extensive evidence base, both through what had been produced by the different groups that had been in place, but also additional extensive information. Certainly, if any of that needs to be updated, any changes, we'll be cognizant of that.
Thank you. I'm going to try and be very quick with my questions here.
I'll try and be quick with the answers.
The anti-poverty strategy is a long-term ambition, reaching over a number of years, and I appreciate that there's a financial restraint at this stage. We do want to be ambitious. I'm a little concerned that the anti-poverty strategy seems to be curtailed because of the current financial situation. Just for the committee here, is there any intentions of adding, if you hear it from the consultation, for that longer term ambition piece that isn't so curtailed with financial difficulties now?
I think the anti-poverty strategy is a strategy of where we want to go and what we want to do. It doesn't include every single action or every single measure that we might put in place to do that. So of course that can change depending on where the finance look. We'll never have all of the money to do all of the things we want to do, but what we can do is make sure that we're putting it where it needs to be, and absolutely we'll keep that under review.
One more question about the financing of this. Now we know that we're hopefully moving into a multi-year budget period. The consultation's out, the reporting will be in the autumn, and then hopefully the final strategy will be available in time for the multi-year strategy budgeting. I'm just wondering if there's any can you see any difficulty with that? I'm just very worried that with all the strategies, unless they're in place prior to the multi-year budget, we might not be able to add those into the budgets.
Sorry, that's why work is continuing on the action plan with departments over the summer period to ensure that departments, when they're looking at the actions that they can deliver, are cognizant of budgetary issues to come, but I'll defer to John.
Yeah, so the multi-year budgeting exercise, the very initial returns are due with Department of Finance colleagues towards the end of August, but the budget will not be set or agreed by the budget will not be set till November, possibly into January by the Executive, so there is ample time, as Emer's referenced, for the action plan to be considered within that 3-year budgeting cycle that we're currently working on.
I know that I did ask the Minister for Finance in the Chamber the other day about that cross-departmental budgeting planning. It's not currently happening, but it would be good to see the other departments, what money that they're setting, to achieve the anti-poverty strategy aims. The last question I have, Minister, is about the Bank of England. Chief Executive had talked about what Labour's doing at the minute is sort of putting the cart before the horse, and he was more interested to see employment support coming forward before sanctions would ever be considered. Do we know when your disability work disability work strategy might be coming out, because that'd be quite important to lead in.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the approach that I have taken, and that's what I've emphasised throughout my conversations, is I do want to see a reduction in the welfare bill, because I want more people to be in work, and I think many of those people want to be in work as well, and that's why we have invested, and I'm going to be making an announcement on that soon. In terms of the disability and work strategy, I believe that's in a good place. I believe we've had good engagement on that, and I sent that to the executive, I think, last week. So I hope that will be on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay, and will that disability and work strategy, I know you'd said in the 2nd of June about investing in a multi-million-pound employment programme. Is the disability and work strategy part of that, or is it separate to it?
Well, the strategy has been formulated separately to that, but obviously there are overlaps. They interact. It's an important part of that. The employment programme that I will be announcing will not exclusively be for those who are are disabled, but obviously there will be a part of that will be for that purpose.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just on that, Minister, you had indicated that you were going to bring a draft of the disability strategy to executive colleagues for consideration before the end of June. Has that happened?
It hasn't. It is going to be with me, I've been told, imminently, so I expect that to be on my desk within the next week, and then I will be forwarding that on to executive colleagues. So disability and work strategy with the executive disability strategy, I hope very, very soon.
You don't have a tighter timeline?
It's not with me yet. I expect it to be with
It
me
will be with Minister shortly.
Next week.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, moving on then to Daniel, please. Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, you're very welcome. Minister, this draft strategy has come under quite a lot of heat and criticism in the last number of weeks. The co-design group and key contributors to this have said that it's not fit for purpose, there's no new actions, it won't make any difference, it lacks clear and time-bound targets, the life cycle approach is questionable, there's no clear funding commitments, and it doesn't meet any of the key principles that we're committed to. Do you feel this draft strategy falls far short of what people were expecting?
I can't comment on what others have been expecting, but from my point of view, I've been clear from the start. I want to make sure that we have a strategy in place that is realistic, that's deliverable, and will actually make a difference in people's lives, and I think that's what we have here. Look, I repeat what I've said. This is a consultation period. I'm genuinely going to listen to what people have to say on that, and if we can make changes to that, that's great. I want it to be the best that it can be, but I want it to be deliverable as well. I don't believe that there's nothing new in here. I don't believe that there will not be any targets associated with that. It absolutely will be funded. Some of those, for example, one of the things that the group had called for was an extension of welfare mitigations. We've extended those welfare mitigations, we have funded those, we've got an executive agreement, the legislation has gone through. There are lots of other things that will be new, as well as funding what we're currently doing as well. But it's a consultation period, so let's hear what people have to say.
Yeah, it does look like it's just business as usual from a lot of the stuff that's in this draft strategy. It doesn't look like there is very much new in it. But that said, the co-design group, who did a lot of work and spent a lot of time and effort on this, will be very disappointed to see that a lot of their fingerprints aren't on the draft strategy. Surely, as Minister, given the reliance on the evidence from them and some of the exceptional organisations that are involved, such as Bernardo's, it's a damning indictment of the department to receive such criticism of this strategy.
Well, I just don't actually think that matches up with reality. We have drawn heavily on the evidence that they have presented, and in terms of the suggestions and the recommendations that they have made, you will find many of them in here. Some of them as things that we have already done, such as deliver an executive childcare strategy, and that there's been a commitment made to that. Looking at measures in terms of keeping people's homes warm, issues around low pay, issues around maintaining the triple lock, providing support to help people access benefits, issues around housing, working with the advice sector about eradicating fuel poverty, eliminating period poverty. Those are all things that they had asked for, all things that have been included. There are some other things that they have asked for that have not been included yet. Some of those I think that we can look at again. Ultimately, I can only go on what departments come to me and say this is what we're doing. So as I've said before, I hope DOF will look at community wealth building again. I hope that the Department for the Economy will look at some of the issues raised around broadband. I hope DFI will look at some of the issues around community infrastructure. Education and health could perhaps look at other issues as well. But it's also important to distinguish between what's in the overall strategy and what will come later on in the action plan, because the action plans will probably see more change year to year as those progress, whereas the strategy is more of those longer term things that we're trying to do.
The track record of the department when it comes to child poverty, comes to poverty generally, has been quite bleak and was the subject of considerable criticism, not least the subject of an inquiry by the Public Accounts Committee, declaring interest as chair, and there was quite a lot of heat in relation to that. Can you reassure us that lessons have been learned by your department and those mistakes will not be repeated?
Of course, that was an executive strategy, so responsibility, I think, is on all departments to make sure that we do what needs to be done to get to where we need to get to. But you'll be aware of the PAC report, the recommendations that have been made, and how we actually are taking those forward as well. I'll be happy to provide you with further information about how we will be doing that.
And just finally, Minister, and in a similar vein, as soon as you had made your press release or did your public statement in relation to the draft strategy being agreed by the executive, hot on your heels was the First Minister to say that she was distancing herself from that strategy. Were any such concerns raised when you brought this to the executive table by any of the executive parties that share that roundtable with you?
We had, and obviously I can't go into detail about executive discussions, but this had been the subject of extensive discussions through the cross-departmental working group, and that was the time and the opportunity for ministers to put forward what they wanted to see within the strategy. I'd received some comments, I'd addressed those comments in correspondence as well, but I think it's safe to say it was not there was not a lengthy debate around this issue, and I certainly left that executive meeting believing there was good consensus on the way forward, and that we were open to consultation on this and to listening to what people had to say, and that there was broad agreement on what we had in front of us. Look, I listen to what others have to say. I will do that through the consultation period, but I was not getting pushback at all within the executive, and I believe that there was good unity among executive colleagues. I understand people can come under a bit of pressure and they can change their positions, or they want to be seen to be on the right side, but I've taken on board all of the criticisms that have been made of this, and we will certainly listen to those. I believe a lot of those don't have a basis in reality. I hope I've explained, and I hope I've reassured the committee today about the approach that I am taking. But if anybody inside or outside the executive have changes that they want to make to that they haven't expressed to me so far, I'm open to listening to those, but I hope that they will also be willing to provide the funding that is necessary if it comes an additional cost as well.
Thank you. Lisa, Anna Eilert.
Walter Rodwire, Minister, you're very welcome. Agus Falter of the Ferran Foster, and your team is also very welcome here today. Minister, as a Gaeilgeoir, like I myself am only but too well aware of the importance of the visibility and the accessibility in relation to the Irish language and all aspects of society here in the north of Ireland. In fact, throughout the whole of Ireland, it has proved to be a very, very useful tool in many ways to all Gaeilgeoirs, both its accessibility and its visibility. So it has caused me concern, the very fact that you've involved yourself in an issue in relation to the central train station, is it now in Belfast, in terms of the Irish language, so that as the Minister responsible for the development, protection of and promotion of the Irish language, can I ask you, Minister, just how committed are you to that, and when are we likely to see an Irish language strategy policy produced as well?
Well, look, again, as your colleague did in the Assembly Chamber earlier on this week, you're making the case for me. It absolutely is a cross-cutting issue because responsibility for languages lies with me, and we have a delicate system of government here in Northern Ireland, and that was there are a lot of work went into making sure that we have stable political institutions here, and those are based on the rules. And the rules are that significant, controversial or cross-cutting issues must come to the executive. And that is why I believed it was important that I intervened in the way that I did, because I believe that this is an important case that is being taken. I had hoped that we wouldn't get to this stage. I would have hoped that we could have had a conversation in the executive about this issue. But unfortunately, I was left with no option other than to make sure that I intervened and provided the court with the evidence that I have, which in my view supports my assertion that this being a controversial and cross-cutting issue should go to the executive. In relation to the Irish language strategy, I take my responsibilities very seriously in regards to the role that I have to promote and protect languages. I believe that needs to be done in a way that is proportionate. I think it needs to be done in a way that is reasonable, and that's why we have set up this cross-departmental working group to ensure that potential actions that could be taken through an Irish language strategy are proportionate, because I fully support the right of people to use language, to learn language, to promote and protect language, but that can't be done at cost to others or to the public person in an unreasonable way.
Minister, just on the back of that question, when he says so, it's very clear that you are the minister responsible for the promotion and development of the Irish language and other languages. However, you yourself are now back in court again as a result of not bringing forward the strategy that you say you are so responsible for. Conor na Gaeilge have said that they are incredibly disappointed to have been left in no position but to seek further remedy from the courts, and that they have seen nothing to convince them that the minister is in any way treating this as a priority for its development. So can you explain the irony in that situation?
Well, that's your analysis of it. I have been clear in the chamber, in this committee before, that there is a process that we're going through. It is a process that is not dissimilar to anti-poverty strategy, to disability strategies, the others that we have put in place. In fact, it's following very closely to where we are in anti-poverty. There are a number of issues to be looked at. This is not solely an issue for the Department for Communities. It impacts on other departments. That's why we have a cross-departmental working group that is in place, and the departments have nominated representatives to that group, and that work has now started.
When will we see a strategy?
Obviously that will depend upon others. It's not solely in my gift anymore because of the work that's going back. But Emer, could you briefly maybe update us just on the cross-departmental working group and when that's expected to be finished?
Yes, so the executive agreed to nominate senior officials to that working group. That working group is convening. The work that the co-design groups and the Conor na Gaeilge and the other groups will be provided to the cross-departmental working group as in line with the anti-poverty strategy. Each department then will assess the impact and the ability to take those issues forward. That will form then into the strategy, and the same approach, not stepping outside, has been taken to the Ulster Scots.
Yeah, and that's the process, but
yes.
What's the timeline?
So the timeline will be over the summer. We would expect autumn time to be advising minister. Where it goes from there, then it will need to be considered by the executive.
Start of the autumn or the end of the autumn? The autumn's a decent period of time in itself.
I'm not going to give any incorrect information to the committee today. We are about to go into summer recess, so.
Have Deputy Chair here indicating, and then Kelly, and I'll come back to you, Melissa, then to wrap up.
I didn't just finish, just only wrapping up, but it says Warren Capital was fine too. In other words, it's like love horse and you'll get oats. And that's very much sort of reflective of how it is that we in the Irish language community feel about the development of the strategy, which is not forthcoming.
Nicola?
Thanks, Chair. And just in the same vein, obviously it's very, very frustrating for Gaelgray right across the north and right across Ireland who have the right to have their language protected and promoted to be facing these delays. And, you know, it's obviously very frustrating for the likes of Conor the Gaeilge having to take forward another judicial review just last week because of these delays. I'll not rehearse what's already been said there, but I just would like to know, Minister, what funding has been put in place for the Irish language strategy whenever it does progress.
Well, look, I don't agree with the characterisation there. This hasn't been stopped. The work is continuing. But we'll take different views on that. And in terms of funding, ultimately that will be subject to executive agreement. It's impossible to say here's how much we're going to spend on something when we don't know what actions will be taken forward. But of course, I'll update the committee at every opportunity on that.
Yeah, I'll just point out, like, that working group is in place since 2021, so it begs the question of what's been happening over the last 4 years and why we're still seeing further delays.
So just to be clear, under this, sorry.
Well, no, go ahead. You're going to say it's only just been nominated. But
yes, so under this executive, the nominations have been refreshed and taken forward. We are not starting from scratch, and I would like to assure the committee on that. We have a wide range of information available to us. But as the Minister said, as an anti-poverty, we are now putting it through the lens of affordability, feasibility, sustainability and deliverability.
Thanks, Emer Kelly.
Just on that, John, you mentioned earlier about the timescale for when the budget is being decided, and this applies to the Irish language strategy as to all of the strategies. If the department misses the timetable for the budget, does that mean then that we cannot take forward investment into any action plans if they haven't been brought forward before the budget is determined? Will we just miss the boat on that and it'll be another 3 years before anybody can look at it again?
I can't really answer that, Kelly, because I'm not actually sure during that 3-year period what will happen with regard to underspend in that budget period. I would also say that the setting of the 3-year budget period is likely to extend into early of next year. So we would certainly hope to have action plans in place for the majority of our strategies and then cost them into the budget. I would suggest that where we don't have action plans in place, we will have enough information where we will be able to potentially place placeholders with Minister's approval and obviously executive approval for those spend. But I would stress again that the important thing in setting all these strategies and the action plans is that those strategies are deliverable and realistic within a very constrained budget that we are likely to be challenged by for the next 3 years.
Just for clarification, this committee, to be honest, is going to hold your feet to the fire on this one, because in that multi-year budget, if we have strategies that don't deliver and don't bring forward an action plan in order to have placeholders or a budget set to them, that will be effectively killing off that theme. So I just say to you, it would be very useful for this committee to receive an idea of the placeholders as soon as possible, and if any are not being brought forward into consideration for the multi-year budget, why not? And I'm interested, for instance, in the gender one, in the LGBTQ, in all of the strategies. The age one, like we've got a member having to bring forward a private member's bill on that. There's a lot of strategies there that if we don't have placeholders for, that this is parts of Section 75 that are not going to have appropriate strategy set for them. So could I just ask then, can we get an update then in the autumn of what the placeholders will be that are being put forward for that? Because we want to support the bids going forward from the department, but it's very hard to do that when we don't have the detail. And I appreciate that you guys don't have the detail, but my goodness, this is, we're back over a year and we still don't have these strategies.
I would say, just for clarity, not all of the actions will require additional expenditure. It's important to consider that as well.
But the other departments will be required to step up for a cross-cutting strategy. So the longer that they take from thinking about what they have to do as well to produce the action plans too. I'm just very concerned that this department, because we have the lead on these strategies, that we're going to miss out on a multi-year budget.
Okay, We have a lot more to cover, so Daniel, very briefly, please.
Minister, not to sound condescending, but you're an extremely capable, tuned-in individual in the Assembly. I find it really depressing and disappointing and poor judgment that you've hooked yourself onto Jamie Bryson's cart in relation to Grand Central. How did you reach that decision in terms of the Irish Language Science to join that judicial review, to intervene in it? And what exactly does that mean for your department, just for the sake of public record?
So I had hoped that I would hope that no case would have had to be taken at all. I would have hoped that what I believe and the advice that I received is very clear in terms of the responsibilities on other ministers. I could have gone straight ahead. I could have taken legal action straight away, because I think it is important that we uphold the law and that ministers are subject to that just the same as everybody else. But despite many attempts, both at executive meetings and through correspondence and through other ministers as well, that didn't happen. So I gave as much time, as much latitude as I could. The minister was not forthcoming. Obviously a case had already been taken at that stage, but I believed that it was important, and the court has agreed, that I have information that would be useful to that, which helps to prove my assertion, and that's why I've taken this forward.
So even though there's no executive consensus in terms of the necessary action, legal or otherwise, you had it within your grasp to go ahead and take a legal action or involve yourself in that judicial review without the consent or agreement of the executive? Is that within your power, is the question I'm asking?
Yes, and there's precedent for that in the
And
past.
is that the same for every minister? For instance, the Minister for Infrastructure this week says she needs executive consent to appeal the GR on the A5. So what's the difference there if that minister needs executive consent?
Because I think it would be impossible for the executive to give its consent if one minister was taking legal action against the other. So I think that it's very clear that it's within my gift, and there's clear legal precedence.
So the minister has basically a minister has the power to take whatever course of legal action required in the interests of the department, say.
No, I don't think any power whatsoever. I think you have to look at precedent and what has happened in the past. I think I know what you're saying here in terms of the A5. I think that's the real point that you're trying to make. But ultimately, that is a significant judgment that would have implications across all others.
That's a very important issue, but we have very important work that we need to continue here today. So moving on now to the issue of housing, Minister. In the past number of weeks, we have seen, disgracefully, families and individuals, children, burnt, beaten and intimidated out of their homes in disgraceful scenes that we have witnessed around the north. As Minister of Housing, what steps have you taken in the meantime to ensure that all of those families have been supported, are in housing, and that those families and children, and indeed a pregnant woman, are safe, secure and housed?
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Chair, I can't provide this information, perhaps privately, to the committee, if that is allowed, because we don't want to talk about individuals because of some of the small numbers, so I can maybe provide that on a confidential basis. But I have been in touch on a number of occasions over the last few weeks with the Housing Executive. Obviously, they're the body that are responsible. I want to reiterate again and make it very, very clear, there is no justification for this whatsoever. Violence is never right, never has been right at all. And although it is an operational matter for the Housing Executive, I have been in touch and with the Chief Executive to offer my full support, and I've offered myself personally in any way in which I can be helpful as well.
Thank you. Kelly?
Minister, have you visited any of those families that were put out just to show support?
I have offered to the Housing Executive and said to the Chief Executive that I'd be happy to meet with anybody that's been affected. That hasn't been taken up yet, and for perhaps understandable reasons, people maybe don't want that focus or that attention, so I've made myself available. If anyone would like to meet with me to talk about this, I'm more than happy to. I'm not going to push myself on others either.
Just in regards to the A5, just going back to housing, the climate change decision that was taken the other day has a remarkable reverberation across all departments, and that includes house building. Has there been any review of plans and projects in housing to make sure that it can comply with climate change, for instance, like the design standards and so on, the way that housing is taken forward?
So you're right to say this will have wide-ranging consequences. We just don't know how wide-ranging at this moment in time. We've had conversations with DSO. I've also I've taken other legal advice on this, and at the minute, the answer is we don't know. We're not sure. However, there are some things, in my view, that are very clear in the judgment, which is that as a result of the decisions that were taken by this House a number of years ago, there are now requirements on us, and that does have an impact. And it will, in my view, not just have an impact on major infrastructure projects, but it will have an impact on smaller ones as well. And I don't think that there is any guarantee that even with the best homes that you can build, even if they're to Passive House standards or whatever else, there is still embedded carbon in the homes that we build. There will be roads that will need to be constructed to take people to those homes. So, I really do believe we have created difficulties for ourselves in the legislation that we have passed. We may be able to find a way through, but I think that there will need to be trade-offs. Best case scenario, this will simply be about trade-offs and the executive having to sit down and work out what needs to be done. That's why I've written to the DAERA Minister, and I've asked him to consider the targets and can we go to something that is realistic. We've talked a lot today about expert groups. Expert groups at that time in 2022 were very, very clear. Don't go to net zero 100% by 2050 because of the unique circumstances we have here in Northern Ireland. So we're getting advice, but my concern is, yes, house building and the carbon associated with that will create problems for us.
Okay, I don't agree with you on that, just because I meet on a regular basis with the construction industry, and they've said that all they need is to be told exactly what they need to do, and they will do it. They're already doing quite a lot of it. In fact, the electric vehicles that are used on site, for instance, to dig foundations, are already helping to contribute towards that net zero goal. What's holding
it cost though as well, Kelly?
It doesn't cost them any more because they're building that into the prices anyway.
Yes.
The design
Yes,
standards.
Prices for who? The people, and this is the key point here, and this is worth emphasising. Though those will go to the cost; those will go to somebody else. Who do those costs go to? Those costs go to the people who have to build the homes. We are making it all more expensive. And I am very passionate about this because we take decisions all the time in this House that have implications. We've had a long conversation this morning about anti-poverty strategy, and we have to understand that these measures that we are taking do come at a cost. And I think we at least need to be honest about that.
Minister,
I'm not in denial. I recognise there's an issue that needs to be dealt with. I'm concerned about costs for people.
So the house is slightly more expensive, but the actual benefits of reducing fuel poverty is enormous for the running costs of that house. So I think we need to just...
Over sometimes a long period of time.
Well, a mortgage lasts 25 or 30 years, Minister. So, I think that you're not reading the room right here. The industry is saying that they need an update on the design standards. Now, you're the Minister over Housing. Are you going to actually go forward with the other ministers and look at the design standards so that our housing is actually brought up to modern standards, to ensure that people can actually have houses that do have inbuilt energy savings within them? Because, to be honest, at the moment we are building stuff that is out of date, and there are housing associations who are trying their best, but the design standards for the houses that we are putting public money into is out of date.
Look, I just want to say, first of all, I am all on for making our homes more energy efficient. In fact, I made a bid in this monitoring round, I think of £3.8 million, to ensure that we could make our homes more fit for purpose. It's one of the primary reasons why I want to see the revitalisation of the housing executive. Yes, our standards could be better, but it's in some of our housing executive stock and existing stock where the real problems lie. And look, there's no doubt about it. You build to the highest spec possible and you will make considerable savings. We see that in Sunningdale, in North Belfast. But all I'm saying is that does come at an additional cost. You can talk about mortgages and the long length of those, that's absolutely correct. But in terms of the homes that I need to build, in some cases, to go to that standard, you're talking up to twice as much as it would otherwise cost for that very, very, very high spec. I'm happy to bring in Mark here to talk a little bit about design standards and where we're at right now. But we do need to be aware that there is that little bit of balancing to be done as well.
To be honest, because our design standards are so low, we're missing out on the savings that could be made in like the Setanta type homes that are built in a factory. But I just think...
Briefly, please, Mark.
Well, I'll try and be very brief because this is a very complex area and there's more than one department involved in it. If you look at the Climate Action Plan that's out for consultation at the minute, some of the existing policies refer to the things that the Minister has said. Some of the proposals are about continuing to uplift the building regulation standards. Now, that will be currently a DOF responsibility rather than DFC, but it is in the residential part of the Climate Action Plan. So there's no doubt that we have a journey to go on in terms of improving right across all tenures. In terms of social stock, the Housing Executive had a really big challenge, and you know that revitalisation is the best way to respond to that. We're also working with the Federation of Housing Associations on what support we could provide using financial transactions capital, because we know that the prospects of getting more capital funding per se are increasingly difficult. You know that as well as anybody. So look, there are things that we're trying to reach for. There's no question that they will require funding of one kind or another, as the Minister says, whether that's capital, whether that's use of FTC, or whether the burden is going to fall on the people who will, in the private sector, private rented sector, have to pay for the construction over whatever period of time. I think the case is around showing the net benefit in terms of reduction in electricity and bills, and hopefully phasing out of fossil fuels.
We're dumping
important issue, and I will be fair to all the members, have to move on. But
just to say, we're dumping £500 million worth of renewable energy into the ground every year. I think that we could be using it a lot better for these sort of costs.
We're looking into that as well.
Important issue, and we will return to it indeed, absolutely. Brian, and then Morris, please.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Just on housing supply, Minister, an extra 9 million in the monitoring round this week. Just if you can clarify how many new social homes you think that will equate to. And I also want to ask about the obstacle of wastewater connections, which you'll be well aware of. And this is it seems like every development received an objection from Northern Ireland Water, certainly in North Belfast for small schemes. We're trying to progress maybe 25 houses. It becomes a delay which can last for years. Some extra funding has been provided. Is where that, and it's a Department for Infrastructure take the lead in that, but it obviously impacts heavily on your department. Is there a monitoring from an equality impact assessment of where extra funding is going to enable wastewater connections? It does seem parts of West Belfast have had extra investment, but as I say, there's North Belfast schemes where that remains an obstacle. So is that engagement happening across departments?
Okay, so on your first question, yes, I've secured an additional £9 million for social housing. Doesn't go far enough, but we're looking to do what we did last year, which was we didn't expect to meet our targets. More money became available. £9 million this year, in this monitoring round, plus first call on the first £2 million next time round, and we're talking roughly 135 homes or so thereabouts.
Yeah, more work would need to be done just to refine that, but that's about right.
It's a ballpark figure of about 135. Yes, wastewater infrastructure, massive issue. I met with the Infrastructure Minister this week. I think this actually shows the benefit of the housing supply strategy and the programme for government commitment, because we have seen additional money allocated this year to ensure connections for homes that were needing to be built. And certainly our experience so far, Mark, is that the housing supply strategy has been useful in that way, in getting departments to work better together. So that's something that I hope will continue, but I made it very clear to the Infrastructure Minister when I met her on Monday that this is something that is essential for us. We need to make sure that we can connect the homes that we're trying to build, and that's a priority for me as well.
Okay.
Brian. Morris, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Welcome to the meeting, Minister. Minister, we heard this morning in the video that the illegal waste dumping is costing, it's a loss of £17 million of revenue, notwithstanding the cost that it takes to remove that waste and the damage to the environment. You spoke about trade-offs there. How do you imagine that type of trade-off against major infrastructure projects that are in the offing if illegal waste is to be tackled properly?
Yeah. Well, look, not directly in my responsibility, but you're absolutely right. This all has an impact on other departments as well, and I'm not sure if it's something that any of my team have had any work on recently. But yeah, mostly a DAERA issue. But more than happy to work with them. But yeah, you're right in terms of the costs. That's money that's not available to be allocated elsewhere.
Thank you, Chair. Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, Minister, your department bid for 230 million to build new social homes. The Minister for Finance allocated 63 and then a further 9, obviously, and this is monitoring around 72, is that right? What conversations did you have with the Finance Minister, or did he had with you, as to why he allocated so little, which is far short of what was expected, given that this is supposed to be a priority for all parties around the executive?
Yes, so there's also £100 million there of RIR, so I was short roughly about £63 million this year. I've got 9 now with the promise of an additional 2, so that number is coming down. I made very clear representations to the Finance Minister, both in correspondence and at the executive meeting. I have told him that this is not enough for us to do what we need to do. I think I got my message across. I think that has been clear, and I've requested that the Finance Minister meet with me so that we can have a plan for the way forward. We need to make sure that we have a very clear path to how we get to meeting those targets. I haven't given up on them. The SDLP have said that I have, but I can guarantee you, Mr. McCrossan, I have not given up on that. I will get every single pound that I can for more social housing, and in addition, I have been working on a set of proposals in regards to how we can reduce the cost of social housing, in particular around what we can do with public sector land. I have an executive paper, and I want to meet with the Finance Minister first to get his support for that, and I believe we have a way forward that can reduce in the longer term the cost of housing. So you'll be aware of the considerable progress that I've made in terms of housing, the new and innovative things that we have been doing, whether it's reducing the cost of temporary accommodation by using housing executive reserves to purchase 600 homes, whether it's the introduction of intermediate rent, and the additional money that we have secured, 153 million of financial transactions capital to expand co-ownership. Lots of things that we're doing. We can't do things that we've always done them. We have to look at new, innovative ways of doing things. That's what I'm committed to, as well as pursuing that additional funding. And I will be more than happy if you want to join me in that, in making those representations to the Finance Minister, to the First Minister, and to other executive colleagues.
Hey, Minister, there's a couple, I know we're very tight for time, a couple of things can we just whiz quickly through when we have you here?
We are over, I'm afraid.
Can you just give us
very
a few
generous
given you haven't been with us
Mr.
since
Chairman,
27th, you haven't been with us since 27th of February.
I'm prepared to give you some more time. Now, that being said, I haven't been asked to come either, and I'm more than happy to come to the committee anytime you would like.
Well, we had an agreement that it would be quarterly, which has gone beyond. So, but let's not waste any more time on that. We'll come back to that one.
Happy to give you a few minutes.
In terms of sport, and there's been a recent announcement the British government have allocated, very welcome announcement, an additional 50 million towards Casement Park, a key executive commitment, flagship project, and I am curious to know, in your role as Minister, given that announcement, what are you now doing to ensure that project is delivered?
Well, the first thing that we need, and what we don't have, is clarity on exactly what this money is and what this means. I know that discussions are ongoing between DOF and the Treasury, but I think it's fair to say that we don't have clarity on exactly what that means in terms of debt, what that means in terms of equity. So that is something that will need to be bottomed out, but other work can go on in the meantime.
What work are you? That's what I'm asking. What work are you doing?
Well, look, again, as I've said, this is not necessarily a project, our own project. You'll be aware of what happened in the past with Windsor and with Ravenhill. We were a grant-giving organisation. So I think a few things still need to happen. The Finance Minister has requested a meeting with me, which I would like to bottom out some of the issues around exactly what that means, because it's not simple and it's not straightforward. We'll hear, I'm sure, more of this soon. We need to figure that out. Secondly, I think the GAA, and I know they're taking time to consider this, but I think the GAA need to consider what this means for their plans. I think they need to consider their strategic need and what way they want to take this forward, and if they're committed to what is still on the table. We haven't had anyone reach out yet in relation to that, but certainly in terms of a meeting with me personally, but certainly that engagement can absolutely continue, and let's get those issues bottomed out.
We're engaging on an ongoing basis at official level and all of that.
Okay.
So it is ongoing.
Okay, thank you, Minister. And just
sorry, and of course I should just say, because it always seems to happen, I'm not forgetting about other sports in this. I recognise there were 4 different projects at one stage: the sub-regional, Casement, Ravenhill and Windsor. 2 of those are proceeding, 2 haven't, and because there was a package in place at that time, I think it's important that we consider them in the round.
Yeah, Russ?
Thank you, Chair. It brings me on to my question about football, and Minister, I declare an interest on the sport from the offset. But Minister, could I ask you, what budget requirements do you think are needed following the assessed need of the football clubs identified in the Northern Ireland Football Fund and the impending grassroots delivery?
We don't have a final figure for that. I've estimated the need before to be £200 million. We've obviously received applications. I haven't seen any of those yet. Those are being assessed for the main element of the football fund, but together with the grassroots element and the National Training Centre, it's still a significant sum of money, and you'll be aware that £200 million is a figure that we've said now for some time, but my expectation would be that is growing.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll give what I hope is the final word then to our Deputy Chair, Nicola. Go ahead, Nicola, please.
Thanks, Chair. I was actually going to move on to the next thing if everyone else has managed that there. Thank you. Minister, you have recently made a number of announcements on different funding streams, which are welcome. I know there was one for musical instruments and one last week on the Community Infrastructure Fund. There was also an announcement for £40,000 towards Orange Fest. So I wonder, can you tell me how you and your department will ensure that this money is spent in a way that really promotes values of diversity and inclusion and respect for all cultural traditions?
Yep. Yes, I've been really pleased that we have been able to make a number of announcements over the last number of weeks. Dealing with poverty, dealing with housing, and these issues are really important. But there are other important elements in my department, such as culture and the arts, and that's something that I'm keen to promote. And in particular, I've listened to the concerns that have been raised around Arts Council funding and the distribution of that. In particular in terms of locations, and the Musical Instruments Fund is a great way of ensuring that we get more people involved in music, whether those are professional musicians that need help, whether it's school groups, other non-professional groups or bands, and the same way in terms of the funding that has been made available for Orange Fest. That was money that was previously in place. I think that was removed. I'm not sure what year that was removed, but that's been put back in place, and I was pleased to be at the launch of that last week in Belfast City Hall. And it's very clear from the organisers that what they're wanting to do is create a very different atmosphere in Belfast City Centre and beyond in terms of the 12th of July, and they want to make it welcoming, and in particular they had highlighted how they want to make it open and welcoming to those from outside of Northern Ireland that might be visiting, tourists that might be interested as well. So look, as with any of our grants, there are responsibilities, and they need to demonstrate how that money is being used, and I'll certainly be able to provide details on that to the committee.
Okay, thanks for that. In regards to the funding for musical instruments, I know there are three strands to that there. Are the three strands equally funded? Funds equally distributed?
Would you have the breakdown for those?
We can provide the written
We
breakdown.
can provide those, but no, they're not equally funded. I know the professional musicians one's probably the smallest, and then the non-professional amateur groups one would be larger than that. But we can get you the breakdown, Nicola. I would say that it changes every year as well. It's not a set sum.
And again, Minister, in regards to that there, how do you promote the likes of that there fund to make sure that all cultural traditions are aware that fund is available? So that all different organisations, the likes of Cultus and that there, are aware of this funding being available. How do you and your department actually promote it?
Well, first of all, I promoted it by doing the announcement in the Great Hall, and I think we had everybody covered there, didn't we? We had the professional, non-professional groups, and did we have someone from Cultus there as well? I think we did. Certainly, we put it out there. We let people know what it's for, who can apply. We'll provide whatever assistance is necessary to that as well. And certainly, if Nicola, if you or any other members of the committee would like to know more about that and how people can apply, we're more than happy to provide that information.
That'd be helpful. Chair, just one final question on this theme, and it's about Fleadh Cheoil na HÉireann coming to Belfast next year. Minister, you'll be well aware of that there, and you'll be well aware of the positive kind of consequences of having the Fleadh in Belfast. It's a massive festival right across Ireland, and there'll be over 500,000 people will be coming to Belfast because of it, which will also obviously provide a massive economic boost for the city. So I just wonder what you and your department are doing to support the Fleadh coming next year, and then even for the bid for 2027 as well.
Yeah, I think this is great news, not just for Belfast, but for Northern Ireland as a whole, because it's an opportunity for us to display our culture and our music, and right across all genres and from all backgrounds, and importantly from all communities as well. And I met with the organisers a couple of months ago now, maybe. So look, I think that Belfast City Council have an important role to play here in the Department for the Economy and Tourism NI primarily, but I've said I'm very keen to help in whatever way that I can. Look, it's not primarily an issue for ourselves, but where support can be given, we're happy to do that, because I recognise it is going to be a significant event, and I think it is an opportunity for us to showcase, like I said, not just Belfast, but all from many different parts of Northern Ireland, not just Belfast. And so I hope that will happen, and I've been very encouraged by speaking to the organisers and how they want to make sure it's an inclusive event. So I've said I'm happy to meet with them again later on this year to see what, if any, assistance we can provide.
Thank you. And Kelly had indicated then she wanted to ask a brief question then on terms of legislation in order to allow us to plan. So Kelly, for you.
We're obviously as a committee working through the sign language legislation. This week we've passed in the House an executive debate on the legislative timetable. It was just if you can give us an idea of anything planned coming through in the autumn time, because then it means that we can move forward.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have that information with me now. We've obviously introduced 4 bills so far. There'll be 7 in total. I can get you that information, but perhaps this might be an opportunity just for me to put on record my concern. I saw a RAG status for our legislation the other day. Everything is going as expected, with the exception of the sign language bill. Obviously, you've extended that for a year of committee scrutiny, and I have a slight concern that is going on. So I know you've got that extra time to do it, but I don't know if it's appropriate. But I would like just to put on record my concern, because there will be a lot coming towards the end of the mandate, and if that could be brought forward so that I can get that into the House as soon as possible, that would really help me, because that's a piece of legislation that's been people have been waiting on for a long time, and anything that you could do on that to help move that forward would be very important, because that's now outside of my original timeline for that.
I think, Minister, just to be very clear, I'm a member of the deaf community, so I'll declare that. The effective scrutiny that this Assembly has allowed us to do through interpreters has required that extra time. So I think, to be honest, we would be welcomed, actually, because it's been said to us that unlike other places, deaf people feel that they're being listened to through our consultation way. We've given ourselves a longer piece of time to allow that. I don't know whether we'll need that, but to be honest, it's extraordinarily difficult, and that's why we need a sign language bill, of the amount of lack of communications for people who are deaf.
That's exactly what I just said, which is you've got the extra time. I didn't vote against it. I didn't make any comment on it at the time, but I'm just saying the only thing worse than not properly taking the time to do it was taking too much time to the point that we may struggle. So all I'm saying is, and I think you agree with me, is if you don't need to use all of that time, don't use it all. But I recognise how important this is. I want to see this done, and I want to see it done well. And I hope that we could work together, and anything we can do to help speed up that process, not losing anything in the process of doing that, of course.
And we have never taken that as we have always taken that as a target. There are very specific requirements for this community to be engaged with, and material has to be produced, translated and sent out, and all of that. The community have expressed to us their appreciation of how engaged the department was in the development of the bill. We want to apply the same level of scrutiny, and I appreciate your offer that you will expedite, Annie, because there is a clear sort of a list of things that would appear that we may add value, and we will be returning those to you, and hopefully that process can come back. But we'll certainly do all we can, and we will do it in a way which meets the needs of that very unique and colourful and wonderful community. Okay, Minister, thank you and your officials for attending today, and appreciate your response to members' questions.
Just on our earlier comments, Mr. Chairman, I have no issue coming to the committee. I'm happy to do that any time, and I've never turned down an invitation, so always more than happy to come here, because I have full confidence in this committee and their ability to do the job, and I'm happy to assist in whatever way I can.
Thank you, Minister. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Enjoy recess.
I don't get a recess. We're still going to be. Thank you.
Those three areas.
Okay, members, so we'll just do a wee quick round-up then before we move forward. But there's a number of items that we have already identified here that we have agreed that the department will send back on foot of questions that have been asked. So that's additional info on the winter fuel payments, the rehousing arrangements following unrest and people being intimidated from their homes, and the funding for the various strands of the instrument scheme funding. So are there any other actions that members want to indicate? And I see Nicola is on screen there already. Nicola.
Yeah, thanks. I just wonder, could we maybe invite the organisers of Orange Fest into the committee, and maybe they could present us exactly what they do, and I suppose how these funds are used to be inclusive. And like the Minister there was very clear that he's confident that they're used well, so it might be a worthy suggestion.
Yeah, members can add. Yeah. Daniel?
I'm just keen to further tease out the action taken by the Minister in relation to the Irish language signs at Central Station. Just to question really whether he does have authority to take that unilateral action. It just doesn't sit right with me. There's obviously various, I've said the E5, and that's fine.
I just do want to issue a note. We know to caution that it is a live legal case, so just.
Yes, no, I'm not going into the details of it, but I'm saying it's really questioning whether the Minister has the power to take that action unilaterally without the consent of executive colleagues. I know it's a bit more tricky than that, but there's a wider issue here that I would have concerns about. Who does it serve?
Any other thoughts, members? Kelly?
Yeah, on the 2nd of June, the Minister had announced investing a multi-million-pound employment programme, and we've asked him about it today. Where's that money coming from? Because it hasn't appeared on any budgets to date, and I just don't know, given the financial constraints that they keep talking about, who's that going to take from in order to be delivered. The disability strategy and the disability work strategy appear to be indicated that they're due out in recess. If we get a copy of that, can that be circulated as soon as possible to all of us? The other thing is, I am extremely concerned about the multi-year budgets coming forward, and John made it very clear that there's deadlines for that. If the strategies that are going forward and the reports that need to be made and then the final strategy and the action plans miss that deadline, can we get a written assurance that those placeholders will be treated? They're not there just to cover, and to make an excuse of money. But I think we need to be assured as this committee that those strategies that were put into New Decade, New Approach as things that needed to be dealt with, that they're not just going to be kicked down the road because we're going to miss this multi-year budgeting scheme.
So a written update on that multi-year budget and the impact
or
of
assurances,
not having assurances
that those strategies are not being forgotten or not being left out.
Maybe that could be raised with the next briefing to see whether they can address it to some extent now, and then the committee can consider that work.
Yeah, and what was the previous bit you said around the disability strategy, around the employment support? Did you get the detail
It's
of that?
where that money's coming from. The Minister has talked about the multi-million pounds investment into this employment. Where's it coming from? I suppose these guys that are coming in might know.
Yeah. Okay. On that, Melissa?
And just, Chair, and I was hoping that we might have actually got to the question too in relation to the Community Infrastructure Fund. And I'd like to have asked the Minister just that in terms of the definition of community buildings and how it is that they will access grants and the likes of it. And what I'm thinking on here in particular, is that particular football clubs and the likes of it, many of them are located in areas where they suffered damage, as a result of flooding and the likes of it. And these are the same clubs and organisations that provide a very vital role, in particular during the time of COVID, whenever many of their members and the likes of it from their and I'm thinking, of my own GAA club and that they provided meals and that to the community. And that I'd hope just that in terms of that Community Infrastructure Fund, that the likes of the GAA clubs and their, where they do have club rooms and the likes of it are recognised, and that they can access that funding.
So would the question be to ask for the criteria to be forwarded to committee as soon as possible?
Yeah.
So, and we may look at a briefing in the future on that. It's an interesting idea. And
sorry,
one
and Chair specifically, sorry.
Just following up on...
Just a second, Morris.
No, I was just going to say, and specifically whether sports club facilities and buildings are included in those criteria.
Well, sports clubs are mentioned in the preamble. So I think the sports club, but what I'd like to know is the defined criteria, but absolutely, sports club, they are mentioned in the...
I was just
and Morris.
going to open it up to say that we need to look at all sports clubs.
Yeah. I think that's the way it's framed.
I only use my own club as an example of the very important role that they play within the community. And many of them, as I say, are located in areas, i.e. next to rivers and the likes of it, because of the nature of the grounds where they suffered.
I think there's tremendous resilience we could build into communities with a little bit of attention to that type of scheme. So thanks for that, Brian.
Just combining that point with what Morris asked earlier, if we could maybe ask for an update formally on the Northern Ireland Football Fund, when will allocations be made, and if they can give us an indication of the scale of applications, because you were asking that question, but when will the funding be announced?
Yeah, members content we seek that. I think we should also, there wasn't a great deal of clarity around casement project. I think we could also ask for a written update on that to keep an idea on what, given that announcement, has hopefully unlocked a further complication that now we see where the department are. So it wasn't time to probe that very much. Anything else, members?
No, the rest of it's all for these guys.
Okay, Clerk.
Those all approved.
I think members are all agreed with those, yes?
Need them to share information.
Members, we're heading to the June monitoring briefing, but I suggest we take a quick comfort break just before we get that, so take a 5-minute break, please. I'm back for 11:45, thank you.
Committee Room 29, Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, Sound.
Moving at all? It's trying to write. Have you anything on there?
Going to a festival.
Yeah. You need to lie down for a while.
Okay, well, I'm waiting for broadcast confirmation.
Okay,
Okay, thank you, members. So we're resuming our meeting at agenda item 8, which is the departmental briefing on the June monitoring round. So I now would like to welcome the following officials to the meeting, and indeed to welcome back John Greer, who is Deputy Secretary of Corporate Services Group, and Cherie Arnold, and Cherie is the Finance Director. The briefing paper, members, is at page 721. So John, would you please brief on the paper, and then we'll get to questions from members, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, committee members, for the opportunity to come in. And for Cherie and myself to brief you on the outturn of the 24-25 position and the June monitoring result. So I'll go quickly through the outturn for 24-25. We had a very small underspend in our departmental expenditure of 5.1 million, which equates to 0.6%. And a small underspend of 1.4% or 3 million in capital. In our annually managed expenditure, we had a small underspend of 3.5%, which relates to 351 million of underspend. Members will understand that the annually managed expenditure is demand-led and volatile, as it largely relates to social security and pensions payments. So largely we have delivered within tolerances a balanced budget. Members were previously briefed on the budget allocated to DFC by the Executive for 25-26. which provided 940.9 million of non-ring-fenced revenue spend to the department and 270 million of capital and 48.1 million of financial transactions capital. And that resource departmental expenditure included an indicated allocation of 2.8 million for national insurance contributions, which is due to be provided in the June monitoring round. While those numbers are large, the department opening budget allocation still reflected a shortfall of 98.6 million or 12%. And 161.3 million or 38% shortfall in capital. So, as previously said at the briefing, this still represents an extremely constrained position for the department. So if I move to the June monitoring round, so as part of this exercise, all departments are asked to submit their reduced requirements. So we submitted reduced requirements totaling 12.7 million across our revenue. And that was largely down to essentially a revaluation due to vesting. In terms of the bids we made in the June monitoring round, these are obviously reflective of the allocations we didn't receive in the 25-26 budget round. So we submitted bids totaling 148.2 million. That included 0.6 of a million for the D-rating grant, 49.9 million of non-ring-fenced resource bids. That related to 17 million of inescapable pressures relating to pay and ALB costs, party employment programmes of 6 million, rate support grant of 12.4 million, and 14 million to cover the additional cost related to the changes with national insurance contributions. We also submitted a bid for a non-cash allocation of 15.7 million that related to depreciation and impairment. I think members will be interested. We also submitted a bid for 82 million relating to capital, 62 of which related to the gap of what is required to hit the target for social homes starts in this year. We also submitted a bid, again, recognising a shortfall to cover disabled adaptations of 13.6 million, 3.8 million for affordable warmth, 1.5 million for the housing development grant, and 1 million for the cladding safety. So following the submission, the executive agreed to come to the June monitoring on the 1st of July. That resulted in us receiving 0.6 million for the D-rating grant, 9 million of capital for our social development housing programme, and 14.5 million recognising those non-cash costs for depreciation and impairment. Obviously, as was briefed earlier, approximately that 9 million will cover approximately 135 new homes. Within the June monitoring round, it was also noted that the DFC will be given first call at up to 2 million for social development housing programme in the future. Obviously, this still means that the department faces a very significantly constrained budget position, which is going to impact our ability to deliver on key programmes such as our social development housing programme. Members, of course, happy to take questions, and obviously Jerry's here to very ably assist me with those questions.
Like the hard ones.
Exactly.
We know.
Thank you. So I suppose a couple of quick ones I hope from me. First of all, on the 9.1 million, very welcome additional sum for housing. I do note and that's 135 new homes. I do note an almost identical bid in around fraud and error, or around fraud and error. If that 9.1 million was agreed, how much of that would be coming back into the budget? And I'm kind of sat in a situation between that choice between 135 extra homes. How has that decision been arrived at? what's the rationale?
The 9.1 million for fraud and error, we haven't bid for that in the current year.
Yeah.
It's reflected in an executive paper. There would need to be a lead time, obviously, to go out and recruit the staff. We need fraud investigators. Our return on investment in 24-25 was 1 day return. So if you were to secure the 9 million, you're talking 70 million, and that's very high level. It would be subject to a full business case being developed. We had notification this morning that Chief Secretary to Treasury has accepted that if we can do a business case that demonstrates our fraud and our savings, that they will consider them and consider Northern Ireland for a share of that money.
So does that mean that would increase, or we would only then get a share of it? Do we know, like, for example, what share they're talking about?
Fresh Start Agreement, now that was going back to 2015, said half.
And any indication, is that where Treasury are considering it, in your opinion?
That's where our Minister would like.
Okay.
If I may, and this came up in the earlier briefing, I think it's our duty as we move into multi-year budgets to recognise the importance, and I guess we would plead with you as members of the committee to help us make the case for multi-year investment in things like fraud and error, which are an investment that will see further funding come back into the executive, and of course there's other things as well as multi-year funding for social housing, which would allow us to deliver on the targets within the programme for government, but also importantly allow us to provide an assurance to the sector that they can go on a development cycle that will allow these social homes to come forward. But I know that members are aware of those priorities.
Okay, thanks, John. The other one that I was interested in is 13.604, I think, in relation to disability adaptations. There's an indication that that was previously met from another source and that this is a new bid. So what has changed to require this to be bid for in this fashion, and what would the knock-on impact be in terms of that on other programmes or other house building efforts?
So you're correct. We bid for 30.8 to adapt NHE properties for tenants with living with disabilities. We've heavily constrained budget this year. We're not able to fund that. It's been covered in previous years by house and land sales. Obviously, it's still an early stage in the year. There may be some scope to put additional funding into that. But in the absence of that this year, we submitted the bid. Obviously, that hasn't been met in the monitoring round. And obviously, it's something we will at this stage assess and table for the next monitoring round.
Is there a concern there that this is becoming a more, those adaptations are vital to keep people living in their homes, to keep people being able to engage in work and all of the other things. So is there a sense that funding is becoming less guaranteed within the system or more difficult to find? And could that have a knock-on effect on terms of getting those adaptations made in an appropriate time frame for the people who need them?
Yeah. Obviously something we're looking at as well too. It's just the fact that our capital budgets this year are so constrained, we can't put an allocation into this early stage. We were doing our best, obviously, to work very closely with the NHE and ensure that money can be made available to them.
Yeah, important.
Yeah, Chair, and just to reflect on that, disabled adaptations, affordable warmth, there are a range of decisions that the Minister has had to make with advice from officials that do reflect your assertion that there is less assurance of future funding coming along, why next year's multi-year budgeting round becomes so important for these things.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
Just on that point then, so we know before that the house sales schemes was funding the Disabled Facilities Grant. My concern is if we're not able to use that money, where will the money come from for any Disabled Facilities Grant in this year? And if people can't have their, I know it's the private sector, if they can't have their homes updated, then they'll be added on to the homeless list. We'll be looking for houses in the social sector. It's a bit of a concerning one. So if there's anything, certainly as this committee can support on that, it would be useful. Yeah, so that Disabled Facility Grant has me very concerned. Is there anything that you guys can do by way of an equality impact assessment to show the negative impact that this decision has taken with regards to people with disabilities who are in the private sector?
Well, that will be covered in the budget equality impact assessment, which is due back, which is currently open and due back with the department in mid-August.
7th of August.
7th of August.
Okay. With regards to the fraud and error, the Treasury business case, that will come back as revenue if it comes back.
We understand it would come back as DEL. So DEL revenue, hopefully. But obviously it's still to be agreed.
Okay. We wouldn't be allowed, is there any mechanism to move that from revenue to capital? I suppose we need the revenue as well, but I'm just thinking about the housing issue.
I think it's something we could discuss with DOF at the time.
Okay.
Plus also too, there's no guarantee it would come to the department. It would be executive monies, but it would be good actually to secure any funding for the wider executive benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing I wanted to ask you about is the decision on the A5. We know that there's money allocated for the A5, and that may well be used later in the year, but if it's not and it comes out for reallocation, what's the latest date that the department could effectively use that money for house building? Is there a cut-off date that it's not going to be able to be used efficiently?
We've taken funding late in the year and previous years, but it's far from ideal. We will be putting in bids throughout the year. There is a commitment in the recent executive paper on the monitor now that said DFC would get first call the next 2 million. We would be hoping it would be significantly more, because at this current stage we've a £35 million gap to deliver on 2,000 new social starts this year. So look, we'll put our bids in the monitor now. Coming up to every monitor now, we work very closely with NHE to kind of assess and to understand what can be delivered. So we'll be putting in the maximum bid to deliver on the units. But as I said, we'll assess it coming up to each monitor round. And even beyond a monitor round, if we could work with DOF to do something, we absolutely would.
But I do think it's important, and I know that members of this committee have received submissions from housing associations and so on, that the ability for the sector to respond and deliver starts later in the financial year will become ever more reduced as we continue to have this drip feeding of the social development housing programme, because they have to start a development programme of land acquisition, planning and so on, incurring professional fees and expenditure themselves. They are unlikely to continue producing that development pipeline if they don't have an assurance that there will be some ability for government to fund social homes.
That's what I was just going to ask then. So if it's all if and buts at this stage, if there was an additional, say for instance 20 or 30 million became available through monitoring round for house building, like some of the housing associations have said it takes up to 2 years before they can break ground because of planning and different stuff, as you've said. Is there any mechanism that the money can leave the department for a purpose that's in the future, so that the money can go into house building?
We don't have any flexibility on carryover of budget. But look,
if it leaves the department but goes elsewhere,
it can go to a scheme if there's land purchase. I suppose if we think back to last year, we started off with a very heavily constrained budget position. We were only able to deliver on 400 homes. It was up to 1,504 by the end of the financial year, and look, supported but not correctly so by end year allocations and in year allocations, which is not ideal. The fact DOF have now come out with a multi-year budget exercise is really positive.
And the Minister, just finally, just tying into that, the Minister had mentioned the work that's ongoing about the availability of public land for use for housing. As far as the financial terms are concerned, then is there a money change in hands, albeit on paper, between the departments for this to get that, or is the asset transferred over? So if education had extra land that could be used for housing, is that transferred within, or does that have a hit on your capital budget?
To be honest, I'm going to need to bring something back on that, because I don't have that answer today.
It'd be good to know, because if we could do that asset transfer between departments, then that's a saving. Yeah. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you, Kelly. Nicola, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, folks, for attending here. I just have a quick question on the employers' national insurance contributions. Can you give some clarity on the current state of that, please? And I know you've noted there in your briefing that the British government did award local councils in England some support. So has the department sought any support from the British government for the community and voluntary sector here?
Yeah, we received an allocation in the June monitoring round of 2.8 million for national insurance contributions within the department, significantly less than what was required. We have, for the voluntary community sector, funded the pressures. So Minister, when the budget was set, he gave an additional 2.8 million actually out. It's a coincidence, the same amount of money to the voluntary community sector this year. We submitted a bid in the June monitoring round for 17.1 million for our own pay pressures within the department. That included pressures within our arm's length bodies. But alongside that as well too, we also submitted a 14.4 million bid for third party national insurance. That was for pressures within local government, 12.2 million and 2.2 million for Supporting People programme. But at this stage, the pressure for the voluntary community sector, it has been funded and the allocations the department has made.
So it's the other groups, the local government not there, they're still feeling the pressure then?
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're working with the money that's been allocated to the department that the executive has received. The executive would have received the Barna consequential of decisions made at UK level, which would have included the money that has gone to English local authorities. It hasn't been received by this department.
And sorry, just finally, were you able to manage to cover the cost for the actual department for increased national insurance contributions?
No, the allocation that we got falls significantly short, and because of that and also pay pressures, we submitted 17.1 million bid. There's a small amount of running costs in that bid, but it's predominantly pay and national insurance, and there's been no allocations for that.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Thanks, Chair.
I just asked a question of clarification, I didn't pick it up, sorry. Did you say that the Supporting People didn't then get their national insurance or the employer's national insurance?
No, but Minister did, in our opening allocations, he did provide 3.7 million of additional monies to homelessness and Supporting People.
Thank you, sorry.
Thanks, Kelly. Brian, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just can I ask, when an allocation is made for depreciation and impairment, is that an actual allocation or is that just recognising the reduction in value of assets? And if it is an actual allocation, what does it go to?
No, it's a non-cash, so it is just recognising the revaluation of the asset.
And we would see that in charity accounts and so on, right?
You still need a bid for it, and it effectively gives you budget cover.
Right. But it's not money set aside for future building costs. It's just recognising the reduction in value of assets. Right. Okay. And the other thing, it's a generic question. This department has a large number of vacancies. What is the financial consequence of that in terms of budget? I mean, when we're carrying vacancies, typically I think around 2,000, has funding been allocated for those jobs or not? Are we carrying the vacancies partly because we don't have the funding, or is it just the recruitment exercise? And what happens to the funding that's not been spent on wages?
So the reality is currently the department has declared vacancies of approximately 2,500 vacancies. Within our current budget allocation, approximately 400 of those vacancies are affordable. Right. So there's a constraint that we cannot recruit the difference in that vacancy allocation of 2,100 because we don't have the budget to do so.
Right. So at some stage a decision has to be made about these number of vacancies. Are they needed? In terms of potential efficiency savings.
So over the last number of years, the department, the minister has taken a number of difficult decisions relating to the management of vacancies. We're currently kicking off a piece of work that is going to review our vacancies. The Northern Ireland Civil Service People Strategy has a key initiative which is looking at developing a strategic workforce model, which we are part of, and obviously part of that is reviewing our headcount requirement, which will have an implication on the level of vacancies the department has. And that was obviously reflected in the Minister's statement to the Assembly on his 25-26 budget.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Any other questions, members? Go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah, it's more just around process, I guess, because we are moving into that multi-year budget process. What will that look like? Will we have flexibility within, say, the 3 years? If there is June monitoring or extra money coming in, is that when you add on anything extra? As Kelly's pointed out, there is a concern there that some of the strategies might miss out on that. So will it only be through either underspend or monitoring rounds?
Yeah. You'll be aware the fact that we're now going into a budget cycle that's 3 years as opposed to 1 year, but the conditions don't change. Things will happen at a pace, and some things will not happen for a bunch of different reasons. If we think about the A5 ruling and the implication that has an expenditure there, those conditions won't change. So there will still be opportunities for things to move throughout departments, and there will still be opportunities for departments to vary monies to different priorities within that 3 year window. And to the question that Kelly put in the previous in terms of budget allocations for strategies, we will always seek to make an allocation for what we either 100% know we will need, or what we have a very sound understanding of what we think we will need in these strategies, and we will make that allocation. That is not to say that during any financial year or period of 3 years, you will be required, because of outside events or new data and knowledge, to do new things. There will still be the opportunity to work with colleagues and departmental colleagues across the executive's 9 departments to seek additional funding for those priorities. And again, it is important to say that a lot of the work that the department does is executive strategies, so other departments will be doing similar to fund relevant interventions that will contribute to delivering on those strategies.
And the likes of arm's length bodies who are funded by the Department for Communities, will they be told at the start of that process, this is what your allocation is for 3 years? Or is it still going to be that kind of will they know exactly how much they're getting in year 1, year 2, year 3 is basically what I'm asking.
My expectation is that they would be getting that assurance, as we will be getting that assurance from the executive. So we will want to provide them with that certainty. Now, there will be, like any good organisation there will be ongoing in-year monitoring of how they're spending their money and so on, to see if there's opportunities for money to be reallocated, or in fact to see if they require any additional money.
Okay.
Okay, well listen, thank you, Cherry and John, for your attendance today, for your briefing. Obviously we will be seeing you again as this process moves on, but thank you for your help with those issues here today. Thank you. Members, any follow-up actions in relation to this item that members wish to note? All okay. All right, members, quite a bit still to cover, so we'll move on briskly back to where we were in terms of correspondence. So I'm now moving on to items 6.12 to 6.19. Can I just flag to members that in relation to 6.12, the clerk has received legal advice taken on redaction of 2 surnames and a phone number. Can I just seek the committee's agreement to consider this item with those changes made, please?
Yeah. Yes.
I am conscious that this correspondence contains serious allegations, and consequently, I would urge caution when we discuss it. Would members agree that in the first instance, the committee seeks comment from the department before considering the issue further? Members agreed with that? Yeah. Thank you. Also, in relation to item 6.18 there, members, invite to the open, would members be content that we RSVP and that I would represent the committee at that event?
Here.
Thank you, members. Very happy to do so.
For you, Chair.
Very happy to do so. A huge event. So thank you for that. Anything else, members, on 6.12 to 6.19? All members always.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Sorry, it was the DFC Pathways to Work Green Paper. It is just, I suppose, I know that we touched on it, and I maybe should have brought it up earlier on, but it is just that the removal of clause 5 and not clause 6 is really, really worrying in terms of that. And I think the Article 2 of that personal independence payments and universal credit bill lays out much more than what was just taken out in clause 5, and the fact that clause 6 is left sitting there tells me how little the government actually pay any heed to Northern Ireland, the fact that it was just left hanging there. So it would just be, if we are writing to the department about the green paper, anything to do with the welfare disability cuts, that we just reference that particular clause and article and as vociferously as we can to say that they need to be removed too. If they're going to remove clause 5, they have to do the same for parity reasons for Northern Ireland.
And just on that, the parity that Shan mentioned, we've always been told in the past that it cost £10 million for a new computer system for us to not be in parity with the rest of the UK. On that basis, then, if clause 6 stays, it's going to cost. We're going to breach parity then, because our people here are going to have to jump through more hoops and have a different scheme than the rest of the UK. So it's just to ask the department: is it a case then that we've broken parity and we'll need a new computer system, which is potentially has a cost of 10 million, and what are they doing with labour to get that removed?
Yeah.
Can I just clarify? And is that a letter to DWP?
I think
would the mechanism be to write to DWP on perhaps both of those issues?
I think Steve Timms is probably the most appropriate minister in DWP, but I do think that for our own department to also be aware that this is probably now one of the bigger issues in terms of this bill going forward, as it relates to Northern Ireland. So potentially a letter to Steve Timms from this committee, if possible, highlighting the fact that if you leave in clause 6 in Article 2, you're putting Northern Ireland at a very severe disadvantage, even more so, but maybe CCing in the department for them to be aware.
We'll make it clear, the letter should make clear that there is a question around work between DWP and communities for the purposes of that CC.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Members content with that? Yeah, thank you, Shan. Important area. Thank you. Okay, members, thank you for that. Members otherwise content with the correspondence memo. Okay, thanks, members. Moving on then to agenda item 9, which is a number of SL1s. The first one is the Social Security Claims and Payments Amendment Regulations NI 2025 and the Social Security Electronic Communications Amendment Order NI 2025. So are members content that the committee also considers the SL1 and letter relating to winter fuel allowance regulation be considered under this agenda item? It came in the papers, came in the table pack. Yeah. Are members content we take it onto this agenda item?
Yeah.
Thank you, members. So members, before we consider the Social Security SL1s, I wish to note my concerns regarding the late arrival and general sense of rush that seems to precede notices of upcoming statutory rules. Clearly, there are often multiple moving parts and often regulations are urgent, but to my mind this is all the more reason why processes must be followed and for clear and timely explanations to be received by this committee when this is not considered possible. So in light of that, members, I propose writing to both the Department and DWP to reiterate the need for due process and transparency, and in order to allow this committee to fulfil properly its scrutiny functions. Are members content?
Yeah.
Thank you. So members, a copy of the proposed rules are page 731. The Claims and Payments Regulations will make stylistic changes to allow for the lists of specified benefits to be set out in alphabetical order and will provide for claims to industrial injuries benefit to be made by telephone. The Electronic Communications Regulations will allow claims for both industrial injuries benefit and employment and support allowance to be made electronically and for communications connected with awards of both benefits to be made electronically. Following receipt of clarification from the Department, I can confirm that the June date for the SRs is incorrect and the correct text should read, "It is proposed that these statutory rules will come into operation in August 2025. The Department has apologised for this error, members. Members, whilst personally I am content with the ambitions of the proposed regulations, I would like to propose writing to the Department to seek confirmation that the move to electronic communication will not prevent those who need in-person communication from still being able to get it. Given the nature of these benefits, I think it's important that the widest possible access is maintained. Are members agreed? We write it?
Agreed.
Kelly?
Given the fact that we're going through the sign language bill, industrial injuries also includes those people who are musicians and others whose hearing has been damaged, and shorts workers, to be honest. So moving to telephone, it needs to include, you know, the text phone. So if we could just maybe highlight that.
Yep. Thank you, Kelly. And do members have any other comments on the proposals, or are you content for the department to proceed to make the rules? Members content, thank you. Moving on, members, to Social Security, habitual residence and past presence and temporary absence amendment regulations, NI 2025, in tabled papers. I have no comments on that other than to note that the department states that the DWP regulations are being made under the urgent procedure. However, Assembly officials are not aware of any such procedure, and I think it may be an idea that we seek some clarification in relation to the apparent appearance of an urgent procedure that no one recognises. Yep. If members are content. Kelly?
Just going to say, this is Amy money, so it will come through as a cost against Northern Ireland, but there will be a certain number of pensioners who will have the allocation taken from them through HMRC at a later date. Will then that be credited against Northern Ireland, or is that just taken into DWP?
That's the winter fuel payments, is it? Which I'm commenting. Yeah.
Right,
So
sorry.
okay, just hold the thought. It's a good one, but just hold that for a second. So just in relation to those habitual residence ones, are members content the department make the rule, or any other comments? Content. Thank you. And then, members, lastly, we've received a letter from the department, also in table papers, regarding the return of winter fuel payments to many, although not all, pensioners.
Yeah.
Individuals with an income of 35,000 or above will have their payment automatically recovered by HMRC. The department assures the committee it is aiming to ensure the legislation for here is operative on the same date as DWP's statutory instrument for England and Wales, to ensure there's no delay in making payments to pensioners here in the north this winter. This truncated timeline means it's unlikely the department will be able to afford the Communities Committee the opportunity to scrutinise the draft statutory rule before it comes into operation. I would also, however, like to remind members that the committee will still have 30 days or 10 sitting days, whichever is longer, to consider the SR following it being laid with the Assembly. That, of course, relates to all proposed SRs discussed today and will take us to at least at the end of September, given recess. So if time is available, the committee will expect to have the time and space to scrutinise the winter fuel payment SR in detail. So, Kelly, you have a comment in relation to that, and then I'll come to other members.
It was just about that, Amy, so it's a cost that's put against Northern Ireland for the winter fuel payment that's being allocated, because it's going to everybody, but then it'll be reclaimed for those who have a higher income. Where does that get credited to? Is that part of the money that Treasury is going to provide back to here, or is that just assumed within DWP, but it should then come off the Northern Ireland total?
So members content we seek information on that? Yeah. Any other comments, members, or are members otherwise content for the department to proceed to make the rule?
Yeah.
Content.
And we will receive, the legislation will be...
You receive the SR, is that
SR
correct?
in September.
Just in our September papers, or can we receive it over the summer, just so that we're seeing it?
My understanding from the department, Brian, is that we will receive the appropriate documentation. The pinch will be on allowing time for the committee to consider the drafting prior to it being laid. Mm-hmm. That doesn't preclude the committee from reviewing it once it has been laid. That's when the 30 days or the 10 sitting days kicks in. But and I think it's a 21-day convention prior to it being laid. I think that's where the pressure is going to be, and that's where the department is not able to confirm that the committee will have it in that time. But my full understanding is that we will receive the text as soon as it is available. I'll confirm that with the department.
No, I'm just mindful we'll probably have a lot of literature going out for our first meeting in September. If we could receive it sooner, just so we have a chance to look over it.
Sorry, we would consider that to be urgent, so that will be dealt with on an individual basis rather than put in one of the two packs, the July and August pack that we Chair mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. This will go straight out on receipt.
So we'll have a chance, just a bit more time in August to have a look over it.
Yeah, apologies, understand.
Okay.
Okay, happy enough with that, Brian, thank you. Okay, members, moving on then to agenda item 10. Which is a briefing by the Irish Men's Shed Associations. So the briefing paper for the item is page 738. I welcome the following representatives then to our meeting this morning. Okay, members, so we're now being joined by Enda Egan, and Enda is CEO of Irish Men's Shed Association, and Ben Nolan, who is Communications Manager with the Irish Men's Shed Association. So Enda, I think it's yourself that will be making some opening remarks. Delighted to see you here. I think we're all very aware of the good work that men's sheds do in particular, and the very unique style of the work that they do. I think I met with some of you at the Long Gallery event you had here previously. And it's obviously that this area is something that this committee has a particular interest in. So many thanks for attending, and please go ahead with your briefing, and we'll come to members then for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, delighted to have been invited by the Committee on Communities to present here today on behalf of sheds in Northern Ireland. So very pleased to be here. So I suppose just to give an introduction, the Irish Men's Sheds Association is an all-Ireland organisation representing sheds in both the Republic and in Northern Ireland. We have about 62 sheds affiliated to us in Northern Ireland. We estimated there are about a total of 120 sheds in Northern Ireland, some which operate independently, some which would be affiliated to the UK Men's Sheds Association. I suppose Men's Sheds is a grassroots organisation. It's come from the ground up. Originally comes from Australia and into the UK and into Ireland. According to our recent survey, there are an average of 26 members in each shed in Northern Ireland. That works out at about 1,800 men per week attending a shed. And I suppose people often ask the question, what actually happens in a shed? What is a men's shed? And the answer to that is this, in theory it's a social space where men come together. The average age of a man in the shed in Northern Ireland is 62 years of age. In the Republic it's slightly higher at 69. And in there, I suppose, what people very often have the concept that it's very kind of, I suppose, workshop orientated, very maybe woodwork, metalwork orientated, and in some cases that is true. But the most important tool in the shed is the kettle. Men often have all their DeWalt's and their Milwaukee tools and all that kind of stuff, and very often there's long debates about which is the most reliable. But the most important tool in the shed is actually the kettle. And generally speaking, men of that age group are seen by kind of state services as being hard to reach group, hard to communicate with, hard to engage in terms of health services and so forth. And in the shed, as I said, the kettle is the most important tool. It is about the social aspect. Men are, I suppose, well-known creatures for not necessarily speaking about issues that are necessarily personal to themselves. What you find is that men don't necessarily talk eye to eye; they talk shoulder to shoulder. That's one of the key straplines for the Men's Sheds Association. But if you throw an old lawnmower engine up on a bench and you get 3 or 4 lads around it to fix it, 2 or 3 hours later they're talking about things that they don't necessarily talk about to their spouse or their partner or their doctor or to people who they should necessarily be speaking to about these issues. So there's something, I suppose, special about the shed environment that is gender specific to men, that allows them a very comfortable space to talk about issues that are pertinent to themselves. Generally speaking, I suppose we find that in the shed, generally you have men who are there as a result of a transition. That transition in their life could be retirement, is one of the major issues that brings men into a shed. So on a Friday, a man aged 65 is working in an environment, a company where he has worked maybe all his life, surrounded by loads of colleagues, and on the following Monday morning he's looking out the window and saying, where does life go from here? It also comes in at a point of maybe illness and recovery from an illness, or at a point maybe where a loved one has passed away. You generally find there is some transition point in a man's life that makes him think about, how do I rebuild my life? What is the main thing that I can do here to maybe rebuild a social network? And that is where the men's shed tends to come into play. It is also worth mentioning very clearly, I suppose, particularly to this committee, that sheds are also major community enablers within our society. It's not just the shed in isolation. You tend to find that the shed allows a load of other community groups to actually do and deliver what it is that they want to do. And that can range from, church organisations to sports groups to youth clubs to older persons groups to organisations like the Best Kept Towns, where in many cases you will find that the park benches that you sit on, the flower boxes that are in the windows of local villages and towns that we go through actually come from the men's shed. In many schools, lots of times sensory gardens and stuff like that have actually been put in by men's sheds. So it's important to kind of get that concept that while what happens in the shed has a huge impact in terms of man's health, in terms of loneliness and so forth, but there is also this huge other added factor, which is the general enablement of other sort of community organisations. And I think that's very important just to mention at this particular point in time. In terms, I suppose, of men's health, the men's sheds offer an alternative sort of effective model for engaging men in their health and well-being. Some of the statistics I know that you'll be very familiar with around this are quite stark. 80% of the 200 plus suicides that take place in Northern Ireland are men. The average expectancy age for a man in Northern Ireland is 7.8 years. For females it's 8.2, so there's a gap there of 3.7. What that tells us is that men tend to die younger. They tend to die younger because they are very vulnerable to some of the main health issues, let it be cancer, let it be heart disease. The incidences among men are higher than there are among women, and the recovery rates, unfortunately, are less as well. Loneliness is a huge issue. I think we have lots of sort of statistics in Northern Ireland in terms of the individual wellbeing report in Northern Ireland that was 23-24, showing the age groups between 55 and 75, but 18% reported being lonely, and that rose to 23% for the age group over 75 years of age. In the Republic of Ireland, some of the latest studies in Europe shows that the Republic of Ireland is the loneliest country in the European Union. And many of those underlying factors would be quite similar in Northern Ireland. And I suppose the shed, for example, is a great place to go to try and offset and mitigate against the loneliness factors. We very often find when we do outreach in terms of sheds that men who are thinking of joining a shed will come up to you, and loneliness and social isolation are the two main factors that they will speak about, and a yearning, I suppose, to try and do something to bring themselves back into society. A recent encounter I had with a man actually in Northern Ireland, and he was saying to me just, when he joined the shed, his first day there was 12 people in the shed with him, and 2 years later he suddenly realises, my God, the shed has brought me in contact with the local school, the local sports club, the local older persons club, the church, and all of a sudden it's not just the shed, there's all these other groups and all these other people that are now in my life that haven't been there before. Our recent Northern Ireland Men's Shed survey reveals to us that 38% of members view mental health and isolation as among the most critical issues that the shed helps to address. And I think that runs in line with the Northern Ireland Commission on Older People's report, which indicates that about 1 in 3 people report loneliness and isolation. So there is a general theme, I suppose, that runs through. In terms, I suppose, of just our general introduction and the issues, I suppose, that are important to speak about, how we ensure that sheds are sustainable in Northern Ireland, I think is quite important. Funding, of course, comes into play, as it does in all organisations. And one of the things that we find from a recent survey is that the average annual cost of running a shed is just over £8,000. About less than £2,000 of that is received on average in grants. Okay, so the remainder gap that's there, the shed struggles to find that shortfall, which generally speaking is around £5,500, and that's made up, generally speaking, again, of maybe local fundraisers or the shed involved in making arts and crafts, or kindling tends to be quite a big product, I suppose, byproduct of sheds, and very often sheds are involved in taking pallets from local shops and places and turning it into kindling. So one of the asks, I suppose, is in terms of overall funding coming into sheds. There is certainly a requirement there to try and put a fund on a steady footing that goes specifically to sheds. There's a similar model in the Republic of Ireland, and that allows the guys who run the shed to ensure that the lights, the insurance and the rent can be paid. So in other words, you can keep the lights on and the door open and the kettle boiled, and that's, I think, a huge message in terms of our message here today, is to how can we look at bringing about that sort of sustainability piece, that you know that you have that coming.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, I do want to thank you for what's a very, very clear briefing document that members have there, and it's really useful to have that. And maybe we could come back to your calls for action, but I am also really keen to get to members' questions, and I think you've just led us nicely onto the crucial part of it there, around the sustainability and the funding. I have to say I'm very aware in my own constituency, even as well as having long had an awareness of the good work in terms of my previous role as a social worker, around the very good work, and you set it out brilliantly there, Enda, around those, not only the immediate connections, which are so important and maybe absolutely critical at a given time, but that wider connection, which benefits all of the community, but it benefits, like the school are benefiting from getting the benches and all of that. Young people are benefiting from seeing all of it. So it's really, really fantastic. I know in my own area, Dungannon and Clogher both have fantastic sheds with significant challenges. So obviously that's a lot of that's around funding. Some of it's around awareness and just promotion and that. And there's some actually probably non-financially heavy items that we could be thinking about. But in terms of funding, given the benefits that all of these types of work do in terms of reducing social isolation and loneliness, which we know has significant physical health as well as mental health problems, are there any contributions received here in the north, or even indeed from the HSE, in terms of supporting these types of initiatives in Men's Shed, or do you see any potential where they could add some support to the equation?
Yes, I think certainly in Northern Ireland, some of the rural groups that fund some of the sheds, certainly with ourselves last year and some other partners, piloted 2 iterations of a health programme that we have called Sheds for Life, and that was through the County Down Rural Development Network. I hope I'm using the right terminology there.
Rural Community Network, yeah.
Yeah, they've been very good and very supportive. So the answer to the question is yes, there is. I think part of the issue is that the organisation doesn't have a structure on the ground in terms of like community development officers to coordinate and pull all that together for sheds. And I'm sure guys in sheds won't mind me saying this, but very often what you find is that the application forms that comes with these kind of funding can be cumbersome, can be difficult, and sometimes the guys in the shed, and I quote, would rather eat the form than complete it. So I think there is definitely, which you're identifying there is definitely a gap where there could be some kind of a catalyst in terms of support deployed that would probably bring about a much bigger effect beyond its effect, I suppose, that would be the sum of the parts really than what it would look like on the surface. You get quite a lot of, I think, bang for your buck in terms of having some kind of support on the ground that can coordinate sheds, that can help them to bring about extra funding in through existing schemes that might be there that they're not aware of.
Yeah, no, I fully agree, and I have to say, Pat Cassidy, for example, runs that Dungannon. Pat's a fantastic carpenter, has created a brilliant facility, open to all. A good man on the kettle as well, I have to say. I can attest to the importance of that. But the thing about applications, or indeed maintaining a Facebook page, are just not things that are within. So if we can provide some additional support, I think we can really make a real difference in terms of population health. Like that is the significance of what we're talking about. It's not dabbling around the edges. It's really fundamental. And if we do want to shift left, as the Minister of Health has flagged in the past, it's things like this that will assist with that. So thank you for that, Kelly.
Thank you very much, and it's good to see you again. County Down Rural Community Network, I know Nicholas, Sandra and Francis very, very well, and the work that they do is great. But one of the things that I've noticed with men's sheds, and particularly in my area, is that capacity building. So you might have a few guys who are really dedicated and committed, and they're the ones that make the application form. But if they can't do it forever, and the capacity building then isn't there. I'm just sort of thinking of the solutions for this. I know that my local GP surgeries are socially prescribing folk, men, to go along to their men's shed to deal with isolation and mental health problems. And it tends to be men who have had to leave work because maybe they've worked in building sites or wherever it has been, and they're just not well enough to be able to do that anymore. But they're socially prescribing the men's shed, but there's no money coming to help the men's shed to deal with it. So I'm just wondering if there's something there about, we're missing a gender strategy, as we know, in Northern Ireland. So I'm just wondering if there's something there about a joint fund, the capacity building for the community organisation of the sheds, to enable, as you say, applications for funding. But then the health side is a big one. The health side, the benefits. It would be good if there was any research that was available of how the men feel after they've been at a men's shed, the improvements that have been made. But can I ask, the loss of the EU funding, has that had a big impact on some of the sheds? I'm just wondering where the availability of funding is coming from.
It's not something that has been reported to us. I think the bigger issue here is the awareness of what is actually available and how to, I suppose, access that would be the bigger feedback that we get. It's not to say that the EU lack of or loss of EU funding isn't an issue, but certainly the bigger issue is to educate and to depart that knowledge as to where the funding pots are and to how to access. But the key piece is that for men in sheds, they want that support in the shed. Ringing up us as an organisation, while that can be a help, what they're really looking for is somebody to come out to them in the shed and help them to make those applications and to put in, the proper kind of statistical information and to present that information in a way that allows that application to be weighted properly in the process of the competitive process of applications. To your point on social prescribing, I would say this point, which is somebody needs to pay for the prescription. We see this in loads of other areas, and to ensure that social prescribing works properly, works to the greatest extent possible, and delivers the benefits to the individual person who is prescribed, but also to the organisation who is the host organisation. There is a whole plethora of supports, I think, that needs to go in around that. It's not just a matter of getting a person and dropping them over there and saying goodbye and good luck and you know what, we're grand now. Because the sheds would report to us that depending on the supports required by the individual that is socially prescribed, the shed may not have the wherewithal, the knowledge and the supports and the policies and procedures that's required to deal with these circumstances when issues arise. And I think from social prescribing, I think everybody can see the benefits of it. I think everybody absolutely supports it. But in the absence of proper supports coming in around the organisation, and in this case you're talking about maybe a local shed in a local rural community somewhere, have they got the proper supports to be able to support the individual person when they come in through social prescribing? The answer to that in many cases is no, and the answer to that in many cases is that those organisations or group are left on their own to try and deal with that themselves.
Just my conscious of time now, folks. So
it's worth saying we did lose sheds due to funding gaps, and I suppose it comes down to that sustainability. When they do lose funding, there isn't another stream to take up and cover the essentials.
And quick back of a fag packet calculations, 120 sheds at 3k each is about £360,000. So it's not as if it's the biggest amount of money, but if it was made up to say £500,000 per year split between a couple of departments that are getting the benefits out of it, there must be a cost benefit analysis of how much you can actually save.
Yes.
Primary care GPs and so on. So if there's anything you have on that you can share with us, that social return on investment, that'd be really helpful.
Really good idea, Kelly. Thank you. I'm going to Nicola and then Melissa Bryan Morris. Go ahead, Nicola, Deputy Chair, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for your presentation here this afternoon. I, like many of the other members of the committee here, I know the very valued work that the Men's Shed brings to our rural communities especially, and I know there's quite a few in my constituency in West Tyrone that do benefit from it. And funny, one very recently has just started in Dromore in West Tyrone in the last number of weeks, and it has already been a big success. And that leads me to my question of what kind of supports your association has for small areas or small communities that want to start a men's shed but don't really know where to begin. Have you got any advice or support for them?
Absolutely, yeah. We developed in association with the UK Association and the Scottish Association, we developed a toolkit which lays out everything that a men's shed is, everything that it can be, and real practical steps as to your first meeting, the roles of officers, right down to succession. It covers a lot of that. So we have produced a toolkit which is widely available.
Okay, and I suppose it's just maybe about getting the word out there to the communities that it is available and to make use of it, I suppose.
Completely.
But that's great, thank you.
Not at all.
Thank you, Nicola. Melissa, Lanneray, Liddehall,
Good Fáilte Róphaig, you're both very welcome. And I've had the opportunity to visit a men's shed in Derry that would have fallen into that category again too, where it would have met all of the objectives that you talked about in terms of mental health and the likes of it. And the other men's shed then in my own locality in Castlederg, a rural area in West Tyrone. And I know it comes in under the auspices of the Churchtown Community Association. Their used premises belonging to them. And the founder of the actual men's shed was a fellow, David Young. And he played a very, very significant role there in the establishment of it. But initially people would have thought too that the men's shed was all about people acquiring basic skills, let's say in terms of joinery or whatever. And it's good to hear the way that it can diversify in many respects. And the other men's group, I don't know whether it comes under the title of men's shed or not, in this, in my own area, we'll say like in the Staban area in particular, it's musicians. That's where they're all introduced to playing music, guitars and the likes of it. And that's a very, very vibrant group as well too, and it rings all of those bells. So really what I'm saying is just that like the comments that everyone else has made, I think the message has to be got out there into the communities and so on, and that one has to look at just even the structures within the men's shed to ensure their continuity, because very often it's so easy, and I've seen this in my own lifetime, it's very easy starting some things. It's much more difficult keeping it going. And in that respect, that's where you do need the structure in there. And hopefully that's what's actually happening at the present time, that those kind of structures are there to ensure that continuity in terms of the personnel who know how to organise and run, and then how to apply and to resource the facility. And the idea of £3,000 per men's shed, I think that's a very modest request as well too.
Yeah, we are finding that other clubs are backing into men's sheds. So you might have started a choir, which then becomes a men's shed because it has the same structures and it becomes a place for people to go. There may be other activities as well. We see vintage cars being another example of activities within a men's shed, which the primary activity has sort of been subsumed into the larger shed, if you like. So that is an active.
Thank you. Thank you. Brian.
Yep. Well, like others, I'm impressed by the modesty of your request. It doesn't sound like many of the sheds, if any, have actual staff employed. It's run voluntary, So it's a very modest request, and I imagine a lot of times with funding, you can get funding to do a project, but it's hard to get funding just for your core costs, for your electricity, your insurance, all the rent, all the things you've set out. It does. I think it speaks about the difference in the perception of men's needs, in society, and when you think of the number of dedicated women's centres there are, with purpose-built buildings. And men are in sheds, and I think that is a challenge to us, in the perception of men's needs, and how you're addressing that. So the two questions very briefly. Does the single-sex issue ever become an issue with getting funding? Because I think there's a strong case for single-sex provision, and you're a positive example of that. And secondly, what sources of funding do you currently have? Is it councils, or is there any DFC funding, given that that's our committee?
So in terms of your first question, in terms of the single-sex issue, no, we haven't seen that. In terms of the funding, so the issue is that in Northern Ireland there is no funding. So you have individual sheds, correctly as you've stated, that may apply for pots of funding for little individual projects, but there is no source directly in terms of the overhead costs of running that shed, keeping it open, keeping the lights on, and ensuring that it's sustainable. That's where I suppose the key kind of issue is. The second issue then is that as an organisation, to have staff in the region to help support the sheds. That's a key one, because going back to the original points that's been made, unless there's somebody on the ground to go into the shed, organise sheds within, let them call county networks or whatever way, to bring them together to meetings, to help them understand the various funding applications that are out there. As Ben has said, governance in sheds is a big issue as well. Health and safety is a big issue. Conflict can sometimes be an issue. So there's loads of managerial type of issues in sheds, as you get in any community group, that need to be managed, and there is support required for that. And that support, generally speaking, is boots on the ground from the point of view of paid staff. At the moment, everything is voluntary, but as I suppose governance issues and all that gets tighter, there is most definitely a need to bring about a level of professionalism in terms of how sheds may be ran, but also funding is directly linked into that. So if you have a process and a structure that allows sheds to access funding, some of that's already there, and there is additional funding required. But if you have that structure there that allows all that to happen, you most definitely will have a much more vibrant shed population in Northern Ireland. One of the issues very often is that you have a community that looks at maybe or thinks about setting up a shed, but because of the supports not necessarily being on the ground, they don't actually bring that to fruition.
And what we're seeing in the county networks in the Republic is that a strong county network will bring sheds together, and new sheds will come within a county that has that strong network. And the sheds indeed they're very supportive of each other. So a strong county network will have sheds visiting each other, materials and machinery being swapped around. So you get they get a real sense of community within that.
As briefly, Chair, you mentioned some affiliate to the UK Association, so I mean that's by choice. Is there some sort of connection still across Northern Ireland? You have some relationships with some the sheds that aren't affiliated with you, or do you just primarily your own ones that are affiliated?
Well, we do have connections with the others as well, but primarily it would be the ones that are members.
Thank you, Brian. Morris.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks for your presentation. Well aware of the good work men sheds do. We've got a fantastic one on Coleraine, aligned to the Natural Garden Project, and they do great work up at the cornfield in Ballysally, and I'm well aware of what they do and the benefit they bring to the community, not just themselves. But when you ask for £3,000 per shed, most of these sheds are run by volunteers, as you know, and it would be a good idea to have a coordinator to help them set up, maintain and sustain. But when you talk about 3,000, are you talking about 3,000 where each shed can apply for up to 3,000, or are you looking for a lump sum for yourselves, or how do you disseminate between Irish men's sheds and UK men's sheds and the allocation of funding?
Well, yeah, an excellent question. So the ask is that there would be a fund available of £3,000 per shed maximum, that sheds could apply for all sheds. Mm-hmm. We represent all sheds in Northern Ireland as well. So that's really the ask there. Then secondary to that, there is funding that's required through, let it be the Irish Men's Sheds Association, to put paid employees on the ground to support all sheds. It's not just the 62, it's every shed in Northern Ireland, Mm-hmm. So that's, and then on top of that you have things like the Sheds for Life Health Programme, that will be funded and made available to all sheds in Northern Ireland also. So there it is.
Good idea, Chair, and if you could send me your pack. There's a guy down there called Billy Ellis who's a heck of a community worker, and it'd be nice to get the information out to him. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well listen, thank you for that. And I think it's been an excellent choice for our final briefing of this session. I have to say, really practical and some very good ideas. We have, and I think members have, a senior call to action. And if members are agreed, I think there's a few things maybe that we could pick up on in terms of action from ourselves. So first of all, to ask DFC and Health to contact yourselves and the UK one with any information or signposting as to any supports that might be appropriate or available to you in the first instance. If members are content that the committee agrees to endorse the call to action that the shed is, we then write to both communities and Health again, asking them to look at the call to action and to work together to see how they might deliver on these. Not, as you have said, Karen, I think others have said, it's not a massive amount of money, but I think it will bring a massive benefit, and I suspect the cost analysis benefit would more than evidence that. So if members are content, I think that's another thing that if members are agreed, we do that. Mm-hmm. And also, I think it would be worthwhile on the issue of socialist prescribing alone. I think it's a very important point you made about, it's a very good asset and a very welcome thing that GPs can prescribe, but that can't be just simply pulled out on a voluntary basis all the time, and I know a lot of that goes on. So maybe if we raise the issue of social prescribing and how that can be supported more formally and more effectively, if members are content with that. Yep. Anything else members want to suggest before we wrap this session?
I'm just going to say at a previous meeting we'd met with Gerard Murray from the Department for Communities, who's the person responsible for councils. I'd be quite keen on that matter. It's not just a matter that affects men's sheds. There's an awful lot of community groups talk about this, is knowing what is available. I would be interested through Department for Communities, through Jared, to ask about that capacity building. Is there allocation within councils for a person or an investment in an organisation that shares out that information locally? Because I would imagine by enabling applications for funding, it would actually release so much local money into the economy that would help organisations, and then the benefits roll on from that. So I don't know whether it's Jared Murray has taken on that role now. So
yeah, and maybe it might be an idea to write to Solace in relation to include Solace in these correspondence in relation to that. And you're suggesting a single point of contact where all groups can sort of use as a navigator.
There could be somebody there. If you imagine it's like a business angel type person, you know, there's somebody who you can reach out to, and they'll have access to information or know where to go and look for it for you. Because these are volunteers we're talking about, and they don't have the capacity to hunt. Yeah.
I think if that role exists at the present time, I know in the Irish Citizens Demand Council.
I think some councils do.
That they do have it, you know.
Even navigator as well in Mid-Ulster, but it's worth writing to see can we get a clear picture of what exists, where the gaps are, and can those be filled. So thanks, members, for that. Yeah. Okay, listen, very briefly now, Brian.
Just briefly, can you just clarify, the Sheds for Life programme, you have a document on that? Yes. Maybe if we could receive that, and you have a costing, and I imagine it could be a variable costing, you know, the more...
Each programme is designed by the Sheds who are taking part. So
well, if you're happy to share that, it'd be
absolutely.
Look at that. And get that in our packet some stage.
Okay, well listen, Goramila Mila Moyagov, Vishin Aintok Simul and Aintok Tawaktok Foster. So very interesting, very important presentation. Ben and Enda, thank you for taking time to brief us today, and we will action these elements that we have agreed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks to the committee, and thanks very much for the actions that you're proposing to take very accurately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, members. And we're getting there now. We're now moving on to agenda item 11, which is our forward work programme, a copy of which is on page 743. As mentioned at the start of the meeting, this will be revisited in detail on our return in September. Do members have any comments, or are they content to note the forward work programme for now?
Yep, content.
Thank you. Members, just in terms of agenda item 12, any other business, I would like at this opportunity to thank the committee staff for what has been an extremely busy, heavy, important session of work. And the amount of work that goes into preparing for each and every element of these meetings, never mind the meeting in its entirety, is absolutely phenomenal. The committee has undertaken some very important work and involved itself in some very significant and important conversations. For example, on the subject of benefit reform and the work that was done around that, and the pressures facing our art sector, and that was a massive amount of work and very, very welcome and important for us. I am delighted to say that Emer will be back with us as clerk very soon and will assist us as we continue to scrutinise the department and, importantly, the Sign Language Bill. I also want to say that given that James has came into post, and I think it almost was like a car changing drivers without ever pulling in to slow down. It was phenomenal in terms of the continuity it was delivered to this committee and to us as members, and I want to thank James for his work in relation to that as well. And finally, from me in relation to that, I want to thank each and every one of you for your attendance, contribution and commitment to this committee, and for your work in it, and to wish each of you a very pleasant break. And please do try to get, I think it is clear we're all ready for a break of some kind. I know we don't, despite recess, we don't switch off, but I think it is important to recharge batteries, and I think members do need to look after themselves as well. And I want to wish each and every one of you a very refreshing summer in that respect, because I guess we're going to be hitting the ground running again in a very short space of time.
And yourself.
You too, Chair.
Same to you, Chair. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing to say is we have a card here for Ellie May. We agreed we would send a card. There's a card here for Ellie May if members would sign that. And to check if members have any other business that they want to raise at this point. No. Thank you. Well then, members, I can confirm that our next meeting will be on 10 a.m. on Thursday 11th September 2025 in the Senate chamber, when we will have an evidence session on the Sign Language Bill from Deaf Interpreters NI. So, Goramila Mayagov members, agus Amor Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29, 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 sound.